young reader audiobooks, the fantasy books. It's Halo podcasts.
Right.
It's just my Alma, my 14-year-old's listening to audio, so she's listening to George Orwell right now.
But you've been watching those like not prepping videos, but like building like tiny houses in the woods or whatever.
Yeah, bush and fieldcraft. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So on YouTube, then you have like kids baking challenge, 1,000 videos on the Glock 45, bushcraft, and then
like good luck. They call it an avatar, right? Where they build this like digital profile of you. Yeah, good luck.
And then there's Annie's cooking videos / music reaction videos / in fact, I'm watching these two kids, they're college students actually.
Okay.
Reaction videos. And it's fascinating again, I've talked with other people about this. The reason I like reaction videos like that is it reignites my excitement for music that I've listened to my whole life. Like I grew up, I was born in 1971.
Right.
So I grew up on my dad's albums, and he was in the Southern rock predominantly, like Grand Funk Railroad, the Eagles.
Who are the people that died in the plane crash?
That's Lynyrd Skynyrd.
There you go.
He wasn't into them. But he also had...
But that's Southern rock, isn't it?
It is, but he was not that, but like Southern rock in the sense of like the Eagles and the kind of Southern California adoption of Allman Brothers and Southern rock, like Skynyrd and so forth.
Sure. Okay.
But one of the albums he had then that was the most formative musical experience to date for me, because I heard it when I was young. It was the first thing I heard, was the Woodstock double album. Specifically Santana Soul Sacrifice, Richie Havens singing Freedom, and like Humble Pie, and like all these bands that were there performing live. And I definitely remember Woodstock better than they do,
because you listened to that album so many times. Yeah,
even though I wasn't there and they were there, but they weren't there.
Well, who was the
like Santana said? He said, I was on so much acid, I literally don't remember going to Woodstock, performing at Woodstock, or leaving. So I'm really glad that they recorded it so I could actually watch my performance. But I'm thinking to myself, this is, I think, the really dark basement of drugs that you don't talk about this stuff.
Right.
When they talk about the 60s and free love and experimentation, is those guys don't remember most of what they did.
Nope.
Like Bill Hicks said, all your favorite music, drugs. Oh, your drugs are bad?
Lost their mind, yeah.
Listen to all your favorite music, all done on drugs. True, 100%. However, not reproducible, because they don't remember it. So they themselves have to watch the performance in order to replicate the performance, and they can't replicate the performance because of the conditions. So the point being then, watching these two college students, they admit they started the channel because they think all current music sucks. Like their generation's music sucks, and there's no talent whatsoever. And this is not...
It's so hard to find any, though, right?
It is, but it's also helpful for me anyways, as a Gen Xer, because my kids grew up listening to grunge, 70s rock, 80s metal, rap, 90s rap. So my kids are analog kids. And what I mean by this is my son, about 3 years ago...
Analogs of you.
Yes. My son realized that his favorite bands all recorded on analog.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then he started going down the rabbit hole of watching documentaries and other YouTube videos that, captured the whole process of audio recording on analog. And when he realized that they were playing their instruments live, and
as a band,
yeah, and that they were often doing this in like one take,
because they're on a tight budget and the whole deal.
That too, or like the Beatles, watching the Beatles or Queen record and realize, well, we're going to do this 50 times until we get this one guitar lick right. So that like on Bullfrog, right? Nobody knows who plays the solo on Bullfrog by the Beatles, because they had so many different cuts of so many different guitar tracks by 3 band members. And then they're not even sure if Ringo played the drums on the track at all, because the other guys, when Ringo wasn't there, they just played the drums.
There's a new documentary coming out. I saw the trailer for it. I think I sent it to you. Mm-hmm. It was a Beatles one. And it shows the less dark side of the Beatles. It looks like, they're having fun, but you can see there's other studios in Abbey Road, and different musicians are coming in and out, and they're going into other people's sessions, and this is happening.
Right. I've watched documentaries about that, actually.
Yeah. I can't remember. Oh, it's Peter Jackson's doing this one.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. He did the one World War I documentary, which I haven't seen.
I haven't either.
Right, where
Interesting.
he rescanned the footage and he used all the motion interpolation
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm
to
also
to
listening
go
to my children.
to go from like 12 frames per second to at least 24. So
Okay.
it's smoother motion, that kind of thing.
Right.
But he restored the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what did he do? Oh, he hired like authors, because this is all without soundtracks. So he hired
Okay.
actors, and he created, and what do you go, Foley artists and the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
So he tried to recreate the soundtrack as well to go with the footage.
That's
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. And now he's doing a Beatles one, but I forget what it's called.
Hmm.
He's just got enough more money than God now, as
Right.
far as a filmmaker goes. He can just
Just
hang out in New
aside,
Zealand.
I didn't hit record yet on Audio Hijack.
I haven't either.
I'll
We're
hit
just,
it when we hit
yeah,
when we
exactly.
start the text.
Yep.
No, so what listening to these college kids then listen to 70s rock in particular, some early 80s stuff like the Police, and then early Bruce Springsteen. A bonus is, and the reason I do listen to them is they actually are both musicians themselves, and one's a physics major, the other one's a computer IT guy. So the audio is really good.
Oh, okay.
Like they actually take time, you can tell in post-production, to make sure that you can hear the track. So that has really great bass, for example.
It's called They Shall Not Grow Old, 2018, Peter Jackson.
Interesting.
World
I'll
War
check
I
that out
restored
for sure.
movie.
In fact, today I should be getting my 4K copy of 1917, along with Tenet and Interstellar. It was a 3-pack for $60.
Well, that'll go great after your operation.
Super stoked. Super stoked. Yeah. No, I am. I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that gets me super excited to run to the mailbox like a child. So me and my 3-year-old are both super stoked for the UPS to show up today because she's got something else coming. Dora. Everything is Dora right now.
What did I call it? Shoot, I just lost the title of it. The film, 2018. Darn it, I just lost it.
They Shall Remember Us?
They shall remember? No. They shall not grow old.
Or They Shall Not Grow Old. I'm still under the effects of morphine and Toradol, so you can't blame me. Anything that I say today is completely under the influence.
All right, They Shall Not Grow
I
Old.
think.
I'm just seeing if it's available. I mean, it's got to be available somewhere.
Right.
It got like no traffic. It's not for free streaming. You got to buy it.
Okay. Well, obviously they didn't have a big marketing budget.
No, apparently not. It's $15 on Amazon.
Jackson kind of fell off after The Hobbit.
I think, you know what? I think he didn't like the blowback because he's a fan and he thought he was doing justice.
Well, it's not his fault. I mean, to be honest.
Well, he's working for Warner Brothers.
Well, that too, but Guillermo del Toro apparently had already kind of scripted and storyboarded 3/4.
That's right.
The film by the time that Jackson took over, and then they're like, hey, you have a month or 2 months or whatever it was. It's some obscene amount of time they gave him to prep.
I didn't know that.
Pre-production. Yeah, so side note then, we'll cut off on a different angle here too. So I went to the ER yesterday, and again, because it's become my favorite place to go. Sarcasm. But I understand now why so many people don't default to, I need to figure out what's wrong with me at home. Because I went in, and so when I went on Christmas Eve, my pain was at 11 out of 10. Like I was bent over in the fetal position. I was writhing in pain. They had to hold me down on the bed just to get an IV in my arm, right? Like,
wow.
I was in a lot of pain.
Wow.
Like catastrophic. Anybody who has had a kidney stone understands this. So I understand they just doped me to the gills with morphine and Toradol and Ativan.
Like a hope and prayer kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, kind of like, well, we need to stabilize him so we can actually do tests to figure out what's wrong with him. They knew what was wrong with me. I walked in, and the doctor's like, you have a kidney stone. I said some words to him about how I'm too healthy to have a kidney stone. And then they had to get me stable to do the CAT scan and then determine whether or not I needed to be ambulanced up to the main hospital. And so that I understand. Like they doped me up to the gills at that time, and I needed it.
Sure.
Yesterday, I walked in yesterday. I got down on my knees because I was in a lot of pain in my side. So I just got on my knees at the reception. I'm like, listen, here's my symptoms. I have numbness in my extremities. I'm disoriented. My kidney feels like a grapefruit. I can't stop, urinate, like all these problems, like pain. I'm here because I have pain. So I get in bed. They get me all, hooked up and stuff, get me a saline pack and everything. And then the nurse is like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain? I'm like, about a 5. It's about a 5. And so again, I'm not at 11. I'm at a 5. She comes in with the exact same cocktail of drugs that they gave me on Christmas Eve when I was over the moon in pain. So she says, are you ready for your drugs? I'm like, what drugs? I'm like, I thought maybe they give me some Tylenol or something. She's like, morphine, Zofran, and Toradol. And I'm like, why? Like I just said it. I'm like, why? She's like,
Yeah,
because you're in
exactly.
pain. I'm like, at 5. I said, I'm at 5. So I'm like, can you like, do you have anything else? Could you give me anything else other than morphine? I hate morphine. It's a here's what I'd compare it to. Like Dilaudid, which I had at Christmas. Dilaudid is like a dog. It just wants you to be happy. So when they inject the Dilaudid into your IV, Dilaudid's like, hey buddy, hey, you want to come over here and hang out? And you're like, yeah, I do, Dilaudid. Let's just hang out. Morphine is like you hear a knock on the front door, you open it, and morphine's like, let's go, and he punches you right in the face.
Yeah.
Like that's morphine for me.
Right. Yeah.
It hits me right here and then it spreads.
Well,
And it's
everyone
almost,
is different, right?
it is. And it's almost like it's trying to like break into my brain. Like it's so violent when it hits me. That's why I don't like it. And they give you the Zofran then to level off the morphine so you don't throw up. And then they give you the Toradol because it's a painkiller.
Well, and I imagine that these are like, my kids that have seizures, the rescue seizure meds, where it's just like, well, they're not actual seizure meds. They're just like they just really high level depressive.
Right. Well, that's why I said to her after she gave me the drug, she's like, how you feeling? I'm like, well, from the neck up, I'm at peace. But I can still feel my kidney and I'm still having spasms. Like I can still feel that. She's like, we'll give it some time. And sure enough, by the time I got discharged, I was like, cool, let's go to Culver's.
Culver's.
But I understand now, having gone through this for the past month, why people will just go to the ER for pain management rather than deal with it themselves. Or just recognize, listen, I am in pain, but it's not an imminent threat to my physical or mental well-being. Versus where I went in, I'm like, listen, I'm in a lot of pain and I just need to know if it's a kidney infection or not. And then we'll determine what to do from there. So give me something strong, but not something that makes me like non-cognizant of my surroundings.
That's like what do you say? Using the appropriate tool. It sounds like they really just use a sledgehammer for everything.
Well, we negotiated down to half.
Oh, just dosing it? Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, give me half. Let's do that. Let's go with half so I can still walk. And so, yeah, we negotiated on that, which was great then, because then after the test came back and I was negative for infection and they figured out it was just pain. And the pain was the pain of my stent is causing my body stress, and the stress is causing me.
Or so you think at this point, right?
That's the theory. That's the hypothesis, because we did the x-rays and they did blood in urine and they're like, yeah, you don't have an infection. You could have a clot in your stent. That's a possibility.
Right. Well, what else are you left with, right? I mean, that's the question.
So she's like, and she kind of beat around the bush, walked around the tree of it's all mental. I'm like, you can say it. I just got done with church and a voters meeting. It's okay for you to say it. You could tell she was a lapsed Catholic though, because I made a joke about how going into church causes me stress, and she's like, "Oh, you don't have to tell me." I'm like,
that's like a common Catholic experience, isn't it?
That's why I said it, because
it's high stress.
So many times,
like because for us, it's like people are looking from our churches to be as low stress as possible,
right? Well, in where I live at, we're surrounded by 4 different Roman Catholic traditions, immigrant traditions. We have Bohemian, German, Irish. Oh, I missed one, right? Bohemian, German, Irish, and there's one more.
As far as Rome?
Yeah, as far as Rome goes. But anyways,
it's not like South or Central America or anything.
No, of course not. I live in Minnesota, in rural Minnesota, and
so it's going to have to be like Estonia or something, some cold place.
Yeah, it's like Ukrainian, that kind of thing.
Latvian,
but deep Roman Catholic roots, deep. So even though they don't go to mass, they still have that guilt and that just they drive by. Like I have a guy now who's coming to church here, and his wife grew up Lutheran in North Dakota, and he grew up Roman Catholic in this area. So he comes from a very old Bohemian family of Roman Catholics. This is amazing to me. Every time he's taken her to mass, she fainted in church.
Huh.
So they went, I think he said the 2 times he tried to take her to mass, she literally fainted in church. She passed out. And I'm like, well, if that's not a sign. I mean, so he's coming to church now. He's kind of running forward recon for her, I think, because he's got 2 kids and then he's also one of my martial arts students. That's
I've seen that before, where like one spouse kind of fills out the water for a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen that several times. Where either the husband, like usually it's the wife who brings the kids and they check out the Sunday school, and then all of a sudden the husband appears. But in this case, it's the dude, and which is great. I think I understand. that guilt. I understand that. You're like, if I walk into church, I pass out. I'm like, okay.
Right.
And
And
for
there's
our
something,
tradition too, though, for our tradition in the conservative Lutheran tradition, or at least it used to be, there's also that sense of like, well, if I go into that church, it's going to be just like my dad's church.
well, that's what I was going to say, that the streaming, you think it would
Yeah.
provide some kind of like beta or trial run for folks,
Right.
but it, like if you're going to say, does this give me a sense of guilt? You might get some of the vibes from
Right.
the service itself, but probably not.
Mhm.
You're actually going to get the vibes from the looks you get from people around you.
Yeah, for sure. The personality of the congregation is more.
Right.
It's like I have a family come. They left a certain Lutheran congregation down the road from me, not LCMS. And then all of a sudden, these two other people showed up from the same congregation, Lutheran, but not LCMS. And then yesterday, like 6 people showed up from that congregation, not LCMS. And I'm like, listen, I'm comfortable with like 1 or 2 people showing up on Sunday, but when 6 to 8, I had just assumed you're here to assassinate me. Like, it makes me super uncomfortable when that many people come to visit at one time.
This is like an infiltration operation or something.
Right. And then we had others. So we had like 10 people all in one set of pews that were not members of our church. It was just so like surreal.
Not normal.
I mean, for us, we're semi-rural and you really have to look for us.
Yeah, you're kind of nestled back in the, not off the main drag and everything.
Well, and so what has happened, and the reason I bring it up is, one, the people that are coming to church are either people who are coming because their church is closed or are still closed because of COVID, or they feel like strangers in their church now because of the COVID guidelines and because of how the clergy or the staff has decided in my state to comply with the mandates that the governor has leveled.
Yeah.
To the present tense. So at least what I'm seeing now is an exodus of not only Lutherans from a Lutheran denomination, not LCMS, but Roman Catholics and Baptists and non-denoms who are also coming to my congregation now. And to the point then, the reason I bring it up is, I guess I should be recording this part, but whatever. They want quote unquote traditional worship, the worship that they grew up with, but they don't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To the point, like, they don't want the guilt, they don't want the judgment and shame walking in or out.
They want liturgical, but they're cautious if it bears too much resemblance to where they came from.
They want liturgical, but they want my sermon to be, I don't even know what it is, because I get different answers from different people who have joined since June.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, you preach like a man. I just want a pastor who's a man. And I'm like, you mean masculine? He's like, yes.
Yeah, we used the word a show ago. Aggressive
and urgent, I guess, is probably the better word. To use Peter's word is like, what was said to me is, when you preach, one, I can tell that you actually believe what you're saying.
Right.
And 2, you're extremely specific in both law and gospel preaching. And 3rd, actually, as one 15-year-old has said to me, I've learned more in a month of your sermons than I did in 4 years of confirmation. And
you want to say, if only you knew, there's so much more.
Right, exactly. But wait, there's more. And so the liturgy,
because you can only scratch the surface in the sermon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great failing of so many of us as clergy, especially when we first come out of the seminary, is feeling like, well, I have to fit the entire history of salvation into my sermon. Like the whole majesty of God, the whole magisterium has to be in this sermon.
I always likened it to the whole train, right?
Yeah.
Every you got to have all the ships. You got to check off all the boxes or whatever it is. Yeah.
Which of course is works righteousness in the end, but it's just our attempt to justify to God, like we did a good job,
or to signal to one another.
That too, for sure.
Yeah.
But my advisor, in art school, when I would, turn in a piece, whether it was printmaking or painting or sculpture or whatever, he had this thing where he would focus in on the most granular part of the whole. And so, we'd have to hang it on the wall, and then all the other students had to judge your work and critique it, which was non-committal because, of course, they knew they were coming up and we didn't want to hurt each other.
Right.
And we were all friends anyways. And then the professor, who was a frustrated artist, would come in and just take a giant dump all over our stuff. That kind of thing is like, you're all failures. No transference there whatsoever. But anyways, Wynn was a really cool guy and really kind. And so he would come in, though, and he would step back. He'd look at it. He'd step close, step back, and then he'd zero in on one part of the entire whole. What's up? Yes, I am recording right now, so just ask the question. It's okay.
We're
I know.
we're getting warmed up. We're getting warmed
close
up.
the door. It's okay though. It's just hundreds of thousands of people are watching you interrupt me. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No one's watching. No one watches this.
Paul is watching. Paul is watching.
Hi, Paul. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So he would zero in on some granular detail of my painting and say, see this? And then he'd like a 1 to 2 inch block. And he'd like, do that.
Right.
Do more of that. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And it literally took me until after I graduated to figure out what he was saying, which is he's like, this right here was when you were like unfiltered and honest. And then the rest of it, you were trying to do art. And it's like, I was taught by my Muay Thai instructor and I teach my students now, which is faster, not harder, faster, not stronger. And so what people don't understand is that the harder you punch, the less powerful your punches are.
I've watched Kung Fu movies. I know all about this.
Right? Be like water. Total concentration. That's Fistful of Yen, Kentucky Fried Movie. Just
right.
It's for adults only though. But it is that point of when you're young and immature, or when you're old and immature, the need to like you said, the whole train. Like the whole train is in this versus rather than focus on the entire history of salvation, the Ordo Salutis, let's just focus in on today's reading. And you're not in just today's, like
you can't even,
right. How about one thing from the wedding at Cana, right?
The water pots.
Maybe the water pots, and maybe not just the water pots, maybe one aspect of the water pot, like he turned water into wine. Jesus' body and blood's right behind me.
Right.
Like maybe that one thing, and like, again, like, oh, well, Jesus' body and blood, the wedding at Cana, like it's just one thing. It's like,
what I did, he was at the wedding.
Right. He was at the wedding. He went
to a wedding.
Right.
That says something.
You know what I thought about while I was reading the gospel lesson? It says that he was invited along with all of his disciples. And I'm like, who plus 12's an RSVP?
Well, and his mom was there too. It's a family wedding.
That's what I'm saying though. Is like, you have to actually, the wedding itself must have been a pretty big deal. If he's like, bring all your friends, whatever, dude. Versus, no, just you.
No, this is.
Can I bring 12 friends? And you're like, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, this is everybody was there.
Which one should, I think, motivate all of us to never tire of reading scripture, because there's always something new to discover or to think about, meditate on. 2, as a preacher, at least in my opinion, just focus on what God gives you to focus on. Not, okay, we're going to go from wedding pot to a meditation on why they were 30-gallon pots and what that means symbolically. And then we're going to focus on his interaction with his mother. And then we're going to...
Yeah, it's not a Bible study where you need to cover all the details.
Right.
That's
And
not the point.
Here's the flip side. We can use this to actually segue in then, because we
haven't started recording yet, so there you go.
I know. So I actually preached on what we're about to read. Like I actually adopted this. I sent you this.
I saw you did. Yeah.
I adopted this for my sermon.
I didn't know if you were going to punt and use the other thing you had going.
I looked at it and I was like, no. That's what I wanted to preach versus what I didn't want to preach, which was this.
Yeah.
Is that the people that have joined, circling back around now, the people that have joined since June, who either their church is closed, their churches refused to open, whatever the reason they came here, the trajectory of my sermon since last year, they're the ones who are like, more of that, more specificity. I want you to get into the granular details of communism, propaganda, COVID, science, or lack of pseudoscience. They're like, because I have to explain that, I have to explain the structure to them, but they understand implicitly what I'm doing, which is, this is the law.
Right.
Like, I'm pointing the finger of the law at this. This is law.
We're not talking about abstractions. It's not ideas. We're not talking about metaphor
No, I don't.
It's not imaginary.
I personally don't have time for that anymore.
No, me neither.
I don't like preaching ideas. Maybe this is one, I think it's just being seasoned, but 2, it's the stoic in me of like, if it's not practical, imminently practical, why are we talking about this? It's like, I can't read.
Well, it might be. It might be. I mean, I have books and books and books. I have rows of books of let's deal with everything in abstract in the event that we need to deal with it in the practical. I get that. You want to work through it philosophically. Right. Except the question is, what, are you going to get to? Are you going to get to a conclusion that's actually effective in the moment?
How do you get to Jesus if you start off with an idea? First of all, right? It's law and gospel. In my opinion, you must drive the entire sermon into Christ.
Well, that's John chapter 1. I mean, it starts with the abstract and it drives into the concrete.
Right, exactly. Actually, we just had that conversation at Bible study because when I taught my council president and some elders Greek, we translated John 1 because it's really easy to translate.
So easy.
And super repetitive, and it's profound. Like we spent 2 weeks just talking about the first 5 verses. And so he brought that up, though, of reminding the rest of the Bible study class, this is the key to the rest of the Bible. Like John chapter 1's 1 through 18-ish. This is it.
And couple that with 1 John 1.
Yeah, 100%. And so I don't think the law should be preached idealistically or abstractly. It has to be specific. That being said, then, those who did not come back to the church, who are members of my church, until June or September, they're the ones who have either stopped coming to church because they don't like my sermons and they're mad at me for my sermon, the way I've changed.
Right.
Or they get up and walk out during the sermon and then come back when I'm done, which is fine because we have the liturgy and the sacrament of the altar. If that's what you want to do, cool. The problem then is that they leave as soon as they hear key words. And what they don't realize is that 85% of the rest of the sermon is me going to Jesus. Like I'm starting off.
So they get triggered.
Yeah. 100%.
Wow.
So they'll leave, like yesterday, someone left during the first paragraph. I'm like, this is literally a 15-minute sermon and you left 30 seconds in. So now if you say to me, you know what, you don't preach the gospel in your sermons anymore. Well, I didn't preach the gospel in the first paragraph.
Right.
Because I was setting up the gospel by way of the law. And so ironically, the law is to clear everything away that stands between you and Christ.
Right.
And you cleared out.
So you're going to miss it.
Well, you're standing in the way of Christ, of Jesus being in relation to you yourself, physically took yourself away from Jesus.
Isn't that incredible?
And then came back later, which is fine. I understand if the Holy Spirit is doing that to you, or like I was meditating in the hospital, as I do, since I have nothing but free time and I refuse to watch their TV. It's always funny when they come in too. I'm meditating and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry to wake you up." I'm like, "No, I was just thinking." Like I was engaging.
People do that. Yeah. They used to,
people,
at least.
People used to engage in thought, not thinking, thought, which is a big thing I'm on right now. But the difference between thinking and thought, because I'm going back and reading the appendix to 1984, where he deals with language. And that's one of the things that Orwell brings up is that everybody was thinking, but no one was capable of thought anymore.
I remember that quote.
And bringing that up to people when they're like, I don't get it. I'm like, yeah, that's where we're at, buddy. That's where we're at.
What's the difference between just kind of going over the same course over and over versus assimilating facts,
right,
and evaluating what's being said? Yeah, critical thinking. It's critical thinking versus
like thinking is what we're doing right now. We're just talking and things are popping into our brains and they're coming out of our mouth. Thought is, okay, I'm in pain. And I don't know why I'm in pain. So I need to seek out the advice of medical experts, which I have plenty of nurses in my congregation who are all like kidney infection. And then I went home.
Happy to tell you. Yes.
Like in my experience, again, they're thinking, but they're not being thoughtful because they're just like spitting out, hey, in my experience, fine, great, awesome. That's wisdom. That's educated.
You know what show I miss? Speaking of medical, is House MD.
Right.
Because the formula was always, the first response was never the right response.
Everybody lies.
Almost always.
Yeah.
And everybody lies. Sometimes they would come back around. The first diagnosis would be the actual diagnosis, even though they discounted it at the beginning, and then they come back around as they receive more data. But it did that as a show. Like it taught people how to be, medically, to do medical diagnosis, be diagnostic. And they were a special clinic for that very purpose. The cases that the doctors couldn't figure out. It
wasn't too long ago when I would go in for checkups. My doctor, the first question my doctor would ask me is, have you been on WebMD lately? Because so many people, like I was taken aback by it, and I'm like, no,
That's
why?
Good.
He's like,
that's good.
So many people who come here have already self-diagnosed that I cannot convince them that they don't have the worst possible disease, right? And but it's so telling about human nature that
that's like hypochondria, except worse.
You're like, oh, I have this pain in my side. It's definitely a tumor. Versus, well, no, you just have peptic upset because
it's not a tumor.
It's an ulcer or something, right? Something minor. But it is interesting about human nature. We always go to the worst. Immediately, we're like, well, it could be just an ulcer, or acid reflux because of what you ate, or you have stage 4 cancer. And
All right,
everyone's
this pertains to the show. We probably need to go there.
right. So instead of saying, well, let's run some tests. So like Annie said to me, my wife's a nurse, she said on the way to the ER, do not say the word kidney infection to them. Do not bring it up. Because as soon as you bring up the term kidney infection, they're going to stop listening to you. Because you've self-diagnosed.
Isn't that prepare for the worst, or expect the worst, prepare for the worst, and you'll be pleasantly surprised.
And I knew that too from experience, is that you don't say the word, you describe the symptoms.
Even if you think you already have the conclusion.
Correct. Don't say you have one. Let them come to that conclusion. It's like,
but you ultimately then are leading, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I am advocating for myself, as we call it. But yeah, no, somebody else brought up, well, why didn't you just ask them to take the stent out yesterday? And I said, have you ever hung out with doctors before? Have you ever, it's like asking my tattooist to cover up another tattoo artist's work. Like, you just don't do it. It's not ethical, but at least amongst doctor friends that I know who are honest, they're like, oh no, dude, no, you don't.
When were you scheduled to have it out anyway?
Today. So unless it was like an imminent, like there was a knot or something in it, they weren't going to take it out. There was no way.
It's a normal day. It's normal.
Yeah,
now you're just going to get it out anyway.
Yeah, 100%. But just the suggestion that I would ask another doctor to step over another doctor, like, are you kidding me? Like, no, that doesn't happen.
Well, that has to do with the way that people make end runs around you. Go get another pastor's opinion, and then, right. I don't tolerate that very well.
It depends on the pastor.
Well,
I don't care if you disagree with me, so long as it's done with wisdom. Versus,
I suppose if that's not a trust, if that guy's not trustworthy, I get that.
You know what I'm saying? You and I both had that, where, and not a pastor in our own denomination, but just another priest or pastor locally has been like, why are you going to listen to that guy? He's a Lutheran. And you're like, really? What does that have to do with anything? Like, what that?
Because we could just flip the script and see how it goes.
Exactly. Right. And I've done that before. I'm guilty of that for sure in the past. Whereas now I just like, if you want to go talk to another pastor and you think that they have anything to offer you better than I do, awesome. I mean, I disagree with you. I said it in the voters meeting yesterday. I said, I'm not going to stop preaching the way I'm preaching, and I'm not going to stop fighting for this church. So if that makes you uncomfortable or you don't like my sermons, you can leave. I understand why you would want to leave, and I will sign a transfer notice for you. I understand. But there are a lot of people now who are members of this church who are coming to this church because of what I'm preaching and how I'm preaching and my pastoral care. So I'm not going to stop, because a year ago, I told all of you what was coming.
Right.
Over and over and over again. And you said, no, you're crazy.
It's been a year.
And it's been a year, and everything I said was true. Everything. And then I said, this is why I know all this stuff. These are the people I know. These are contacts that I've made through my work. They're the ones who gave me the information.
Wow.
But I kept it close to the vest until now, because I knew I tried and you wouldn't listen.
I distinctly remember telling one of my teachers in the hallway in mid-January, said, there's this thing, it's in China. They're saying it's no big deal. Yeah. But I'm telling you, it's going to be a very big deal. And here's what's going to happen.
That's what I said too.
I said, here's what's going to happen. They're going to take the most severe actions because out of caution, and whether they're helpful or not, it doesn't even matter, because they're not verified. You can't. They're self-authenticating.
I was going to say, it's almost as if the politicians went on WebMD.
Right, because they take lockdowns. Lockdowns aren't proven to work, but lockdowns will work, because even if they do nothing, they will have worked.
Correct.
So it's just like,
it's a syllogism.
Yeah, it's a syllogism. Yeah, yeah. And we see this now. Like what we put 25. I think they're up to 30,000 now, is what they're saying. Troops in DC. Yeah. So we needed them. Why?
For what? Right.
Well, we'll never know, because it prevented it from happening.
Exactly. Yep.
So,
war on terror, war on drugs, same circular.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's the thing. We're going to turn the war on terror onto our own citizens now.
Yeah, it's a war on a virus. That's why they're building. Well, they're using the FEMA tents now. Is they're prepping them to basically arrest people who are COVID violators.
Probably don't want to
conclude my thought before I move on.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
That's why I said, if I told you right now what's going to happen this year, you'd think I was even nuttier than last year, and yet if I told you, it'd be true, because I proved that I was right all year last year. So I'm going to preach on it as it comes, and you're going to remember me saying this to you again. And maybe eventually you accept that I do know people who know information that they're giving to me, all the way up to President Trump's campaign team.
Right.
Okay. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying I'm fact checking my information against people who know stuff way more than I know.
And that's the beauty of the internet. It's also the curse.
It is for sure.
Because you got to filter still.
To have a contact through the podcast. But anyways, to have a contact who's a high-level virologist at a university. And then be like, hey man, is this real or not? And have a virologist go like, yes or no. I'm good. Like if a virologist tells me, and he's a legit virologist at a legit university and does legit research, and I can go online and be like, oh, you're a legit dude. And you just happen to be a Christian. Likewise, you listen to the podcast. So shout out to that person. And shout out to all our listeners in China. Oh, wait, we're not recording it, so I'll say that. But shout out to all our listeners.
No, this is on YouTube. Nobody in China is seeing this.
I was going to say, no one in China and North Korea is watching YouTube legally. Yeah, no, I mean, so circling all the way back around as a segue into this text again, we're called to preach the truth. Small t truth, big T truth, which is the whole point of my sermon yesterday. Propaganda is not the truth. Small t truth, political truth, medical truth, social, cultural truth, that's not the truth. Jesus is the truth. The truth is a person, not a thing. You as a Christian have to stop saying it's okay to occasionally be dishonest with people. It's okay for politicians, medical people to occasionally be dishonest to protect us. Because you're a Christian and you walk in the truth.
Right.
You weren't baptized into part of God, like half of God. You don't accept Jesus as your personal savior, kinda, the parts that you like. Likewise, you can't say, well, I'm occasionally dishonest. Okay, but when? When are you dishonest?
Or they call that a white lie?
Yeah, it's a logical inconsistency. Because I don't know now when you're being honest and when you're lying. Because you just said, I'm occasionally dishonest. It's like, oh. Okay.
Well, especially if there's never any corrective,
Correct. Yeah.
We call it repentance, but whatever.
Right. So let's hit record, because that's actually a part of the text. And then we can actually use this to tease people to come back and watch the YouTube stream.
All right. So I'm rolling.
And I am too. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Bandwidth Podcast. Episode number 180-something.
9.
And that's Christopher Gillespie.
Who is chilling and willing, maxing and relaxing.
Moving in
I haven't done that in a while. Oh, yeah.
What?
No.
Relaxed or gone in a direction?
And maxed.
Okay.
I'm always redlining, but...
There we go. And I'm Donovan Riley.
You are.
We had quite a long 24-minute, 23-minute conversation leading up to us hitting record over on YouTube. So you can go check out the video on YouTube and you'll get an extra 20-plus minutes of content, which actually wasn't just rambling dialogue. We actually talked about some substantive things. Just more vent, debrief, however you want to say it. Yeah. It's Monday. And,
but we have to warm up.
That's for sure.
Get our brains in gear, so to speak.
Well, to the point of what we were talking about over on the YouTube stream, Mondays or Sunday afternoon is usually where we just go home and take a nap.
Right.
Because
whether we want to or not, often.
Yeah. Because Bible study, divine service, it may seem like we're just reading out of a book, and we are practically speaking. But okay, so here's some TMI, but it goes to the point, right? So with my kidney and everything right now, because I have a kidney stent in, when I train at the gym, I urinate blood because of the amount of like my core work that's being done there, right?
Right.
And so
you did say TMI, so yeah.
I said TMI. Okay. Yesterday after service, because of all the things that ended up putting me in the ER, when I got home from church, guess what? I hadn't urinated blood since Thursday. I urinated blood after church. Which tells me then when I'm in church, I'm using the same core muscles that I'm using when I'm at the gym. Well, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I got to figure that out. Like, why am I so like?
It's either that or the mental effort puts the same kind of physical strain on your body.
What is it? 18% of the calories that you burn during the day are your brain.
It's something like that.
It's weird. Like when I learned that, I had to double check it because I didn't believe it. I was like, oh, come on.
Well, everybody knows about like emotional exhaustion, right?
Sure, absolutely.
You go to a funeral or something and you're just like wiped out afterwards.
You mean weakness? I'm kidding.
Well, right.
I'm kidding. That's a joke.
Right,
people.
but the interconnectedness of the body and all the
Right. Oh, the
systems.
gut-brain biome, exactly.
Right, and there's those sympathetic responses.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
think it is an interesting hypothesis now that so many people in certain areas of science think that that what we call consciousness actually resides in the stomach because of the gut-brain relationship.
Meaning the ancients were right when they said it was a gut feeling.
Yeah, yeah. We call it intuition, but it's really your central brain, the amygdala. Well, in the past, we linked it to the central brain. We're like, oh, it's your amygdala, and it's actually sending, these pre-conscious signals to your frontal lobe. And so, that's the neuroscience side of the house. But now they're saying, no, we know that the gut bacteria and everything, it actually feeds the brain. It grows the cells for the brain. What you put in your body is used for cell regeneration. And so the bacteria in your gut and the bacteria in your intestines
Right.
actually determine the state of your brain, which
There's
determines your emotions.
There's some pretty, I wouldn't say conclusive, but substantial research about the relationship of the gut biome to autistic symptoms.
Mhm.
And, and toxicity in both
Right.
brain and gut. But
Mhm.
what was the other thing? Oh, spiritual disciplines. One of
Mhm.
them is fasting. It's right in the
Yep.
Bible,
Yep.
right? But it's in other traditions as well.
Right.
And you say, well, wait a minute. Why would fasting be such a universally accepted
Mhm.
spiritual discipline, a way of to
Mhm.
provide focus and
Cleansing.
it is, and you want to say, well, it's because you're hungry. It's more
Mhm.
than
Right.
that, because there's all of the
Mhm.
the ketogenic effect and other
Right.
things that go
Yep.
on
Yep.
that affect your brain
Mhm.
and your ability. I mean, you think you'd be hungry, so you'd be distracted, but it
Mhm.
turns out at
No,
least
you
in my
become
experience,
hyper-focused.
it's the opposite.
Yeah.
You're much more perceptive of what's going on,
Mhm.
less
No, that
sluggish, etc.
that happened to me again at Christmas time. From Christmas until the first of the year, I lost 10 pounds because of everything with the
Mm,
hospitalization and stuff. And I felt so clear. Like, mentally, I was so clear, so sober, so focused. It was weird. But yet at the same time, because my body wasn't functioning correctly, I'm, like, hyper mentally focused, but physically, I'm like, "I'm not getting out of bed today."
yeah.
So it was super frustrating because my brain's like, "Let's tackle some big problems."
Oops.
And so I got a lot of good thinking done, thought process. But no, it is interesting that we automatically, again, make it about, well, this is what I think it means. This is
Right.
what I intend to use it for versus your body saying, actually, this is what we're going to do with it. I was thinking about this again the other day because somebody I know had a baby. And when I was young and hyper hormonal, I used to think that a girl's body parts, a woman's body parts, were just for my pleasure. They were like a fun house for me, right, to
Oh,
play with.
okay.
And then, yes, because I'm sure you never experienced that thought as a teenage boy. I'm
I don't know what you're talking about.
like, all of this is given to me. And then I was there at the birth of my child. And I was like, oh, that's what those are for. Okay. They're for utility. They have a utilitarian purpose. They're not for me. But I had that conversation again the other day. That's why I bring it up. It's fresh in my mind of how I laughed at myself because I actually said it out loud when my son was born. And then the
Really?
doctor just looked at me and laughed at me. He's like, yeah. I'm like, no, never mind. Let me explain it to you.
Is
And
that like
then,
making the secondary the primary?
yeah,
Yeah.
100%, which
Yeah.
is what we do as human beings. It's like we talked about with self-diagnosis. We always go, this is
Right.
what it's got to be because I've decided when I go into the doctor's office, I've definitely got lupus versus the doctor like, no, I think you have a bruised hip. I think, did you fall recently? You're like, well, I did fall on the ice, but it's definitely lupus.
Right.
And like you said, with leaders and the lockdown from COVID, it's like it's human nature. And the more prominent you are publicly, the easier it is to peg you for those
Right.
extreme reactions. But we all do it in our
Oh,
lives
sure.
all the time. I think of like all of the fights I've won in the shower. And I have to sometimes stop myself and remind myself, you're not being sober. You're literally fighting a friend in your brain who would never start a fight with you in the first place. And yet you're sitting here with this imaginary slight, this imaginary reason they attacked you and why you're going to kick their butt. It's like, you're
So,
insane.
so you're talking about language games that you even
Mhm.
play in your own head. I was listening to, I only listened to the first part of it so far, but the most recent Jordan Peterson podcast. He does an
Mm.
interview with a former student of his who ended up in Hollywood. And then recently, he's a
Okay.
Democrat,
Yeah.
a moderate Democrat that got involved in self-producing advertisements But he was talking about how frustrated he is with the DNC because of their kind of lack of resilience against the most extreme positions within the party. Yep. We've talked about that on the show, right? And that his goal was to try to present, the best of liberal democracy, those democratic ideals that they supposedly espouse, and to present them in a way that is appealing, to say a conservative Christian.
Right.
Very interesting because it relates to propaganda, because he talks about language games,
right,
and how like there's all these what do you want to say, like keywords that if you use, what kind of conversation's being had. Like if you say Latino versus Latinx, right, this made up word that, well, that shows that you're on our side, right? You're on our team. And it's very interesting because he's just talking about how he had all these Hollywood types involved, and then one by one they fell off because they couldn't get on board with the idea that you were going to listen to an opposing viewpoint and try to find a moderate position where that actually you compromise, they compromise, and so that you can live together, which is today's MLK Jr. Day, right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
did I send you that breakdown? I think I did of how to put this. People that are historical scholars, historians who pay attention to this and are really invested in MLK, that his assassination was plotted out by the two people standing on his right and left that day.
Oh, I mean, we know they were spying on him, and that they had used propaganda to slander him with his affairs and whatnot, right?
Here's what happened, and this is what set everybody off. One of the two people on his right and left, one of them was Jesse Jackson. The other person, you can draw your own conclusions from that. I'm familiar with the history of Jesse Jackson because I grew up with him running for president.
Yeah.
And then in college, I did research on him. But the guy on Martin Luther King's other side of him, who had to step out of the way for the bullet to actually hit Dr. King in the head, in a speech that he gave in a church, he had one of those Michelle Michael slip-ups, where he said, if I hadn't have stepped out of the way, then the bullet could have never hit him.
He said out loud.
I had to get out of the way. He said, I had to get out of the way for the bullet to hit him. And you're like, wait, what? What do you mean you had to get out of the way so the bullet could hit him? And it was one of those cause effect kind of things, like I had to do this so this happened, and everyone's like, whoa, wait, what?
So where can I find this? Do this research?
I'll send you the video again. But
okay, we'll link
somebody I follow. It's a guy I follow on Instagram who does deep dives on this and Black history, because he's kind of a citizen Black historian. Great guy, actually, very cogent analysis of different things, not tinfoil hat kind of guy. Like here, and basically that statement made people start going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, let's check this guy out. Like, where's this guy at? Who are his associates? What was really happening that day? Like, why was King out on it turns out that these two guys wanted him to step out on the patio. He never actually did that. That wasn't normal for him because he was aware of assassination attempts on his life previous to this. So he never stood out that's why when he was on the mall, he had himself surrounded by people.
He knew, well, it would have to be a setup.
Right. People would tell him, like, they're going to kill you. He knew COINTELPRO. He knew about COINTELPRO. He knew about all this stuff, right? Point is, though, that when you say stuff like that, and then to your point, then people refuse to engage their curiosity and say, hey, let's go down Operation Northwoods. Let's go down the rabbit hole of Operation Northwoods.
Because it just seems too far-fetched.
Too far-fetched. And as a friend of mine says, you can either trust in history or trust your government, but you can't trust both. Because what history will teach you is that your government has been playing with you for a very long time and engaged in a war of propaganda against you for a very long time. And the pharmaceutical companies. It's like I tell people, when you cite a medical study to me, I want to know who funded it first. Before you say, well, according to scientists, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, who funded these scientists? It's like, we know for a fact now that scientists were paid off in the 50s by the sugar industry to vilify saturated fats and to say there's nothing bad about sugar, refined sugar.
Now that's crazy talk, man.
I know. Primary materials are available on the internet for everybody to read. They admitted it. $55,000. Can you imagine? Well, I guess in the 50s, that's probably a lot of money. But I'm just like, really? 55,000? How many of there were you on the team of scientists? Let me try harder. Ask for more.
Who is it that said all men are liars?
Dr. House.
Dr. House. Also, Psalm 116, verse 11.
I know.
I said in my haste, all men are liars, though. I mean,
right.
the context is important.
Mhm.
But it's to trust in God, not in men. And that's what I had a question. That was the sermon I was going to preach. I should have preached on it. I forgot all about it. I had a question. Well, I was just, I was going to the post office and I had a question there. Somebody asked me in the post office because I guess people are starting to find out who I am. And it's a small town, right?
Yeah, right.
They said, well, you think God is at work in all these things? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. Well, what is God telling you? And I'm like,
Repent.
That's the only thing you can say, right?
Repent and believe. Yeah.
Yeah. And you say, well, so what are we to repent of? That we've trusted in these people.
Right.
Ultimately.
That the state has become our God, our religion. We covered this in the podcast last week, actually.
We did, yeah. Well, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
I could have preached that sermon. But it didn't seem to have as much to do with marriage, and I did want to focus on that a little bit.
Right. Yeah, no, I focused on marriage at Cana, or the wedding at Cana, by way of propaganda and the truth.
It's a little tangential, but
Yeah, I don't care anymore.
It's true. Word got around though from the wedding.
Mhm.
That was his first
100%.
big miracle, and it was the second sign in John's gospel.
True.
So yeah.
But back to your point too, is that you can categorize someone politically if you want to this way, because this happened to me yesterday. When I say your health is not my responsibility.
Right.
Okay. Second of all, by my taking care of my personal health, I'm actually making you my responsibility. Because if I'm healthy, you're in no danger of being infected by me.
It's true.
So by blaming me for the fact that you eat garbage and drink garbage and put garbage into your eyes and your ears, and therefore you're unhealthy, and then you follow along with all of these worthless mandates, you're putting yourself at risk, and therefore me.
Right.
Versus if you take care of your personal health, mental, physical, and emotional, and I take care of mine as an individual, and I take ownership of myself, guess what? I benefit my entire neighborhood.
You do, but you also still become the voice of the law.
Yes, 100%.
I mean, you are an accusing voice by your own actions.
It's interesting. I had a text conversation with a member of my church last night who checked in on me, and that's what she said. She's like, thank God that you're so healthy so that something like this doesn't just destroy you, like destroy your immune system, destroy your body where you can't recover from it.
Okay.
I'm like, absolutely. But she's a healthy person too. Versus other people at church who they transfer their unhealthiness onto me and say, well, the reason that you're sick now is because you're too healthy. And this is proof.
Right.
I'm like, you know who hasn't gotten COVID? This guy.
I remember it. Yeah. I remember
you
back.
Know who else hasn't? This guy's family.
When I finally, started being a little bit more attentive to weight more than anything. And people were like, oh, you're so skinny. I think it was when I first did, paleo kind of stuff. Like, Pastor, you're so skinny. And I'm like, not actually, really.
Yeah.
Like I could stand to use 30 or 40 more pounds. So I don't know what you mean by skinny as compared to what I used to be, compared to who you are. I mean, that's it just you end up being a mirror.
So for my height, I'm 6'2". My weight is supposed to be on average 181 pounds.
Right.
And I was around there and I can get up to there if I need to, but my ideal weight is 171 pounds for my frame. And you can go into the whole ectomorph, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But the point is like, I am at my best health-wise.
Xenomorph? Did you say xenomorph?
Yeah. No, I didn't say that. Shut up, reptilian. And, but for me, then I know that my homeostasis for me is about 171 to 175. That's where my body wants to settle at. And I'm at my best mentally and physically and emotionally at that weight.
Right.
I also know that the USDA and the FDA adjust those weights and measures for the culture.
Well, what's the other thing they've done? They've changed the equivalent waist size.
Yeah, they have.
They're not equivalent to what they used to be.
Because she has been losing all of her baby weight from the past 3 kids. And so the pants that she had before the third child was born, because with the first 2, she really bounced back. Like she had a baby, and then 6 months later, she was skinny Annie. Then the third one kind of...
It doesn't work that way anymore.
No, the third one wrecked her because her body's like, oh, we know what to do.
Wait till you get to 10.
Actually, I joked about having 2 more, and she's like, well, you better find some kids to adopt then. Like,
I mean, it even gets worse. I mean, to the point where because
your body's just like, listen, here's how things are going to go.
Time to inflate again. Okay.
Right. And so it's like we're gonna preemptively put on 80 pounds just to cut out the middleman. Like we're not gonna go like a couple pounds of like let's just put it all on once, right? Let's just retain all the fluid and and all the consequences with that, which are terrible, by the way. And
Right.
so now she goes, okay, these are a size 4 pre 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever.
Right.
These are a size 4 today. And she's like, same company, same brand,
Right.
totally different waist, totally different.
Yeah, but if you go back 50 years, it's even more dramatic.
It really is. Yeah.
Like it's a sliding scale. And there's a lot of there's a lot of psychology going on there.
Oh, very much so, my friend. Size 0 jeans, in some brands that my wife shops at, size 0 is now a size 4. Like if you buy size 0, they used to be size 4 pants, and now they're calling them zeros.
So they're actually getting skinnier.
Bigger. Did I reverse that?
I think you
Whatever.
did.
So size 4, like old size, so old size 0 is size 4. There we go. Yeah. And then size, like what used to be size 4 pants are now size 8.
I think the listeners understand.
You got me. Again, I don't deal in sizes. I'm just like, these fit.
Maths.
Like I have no hips, so I just find skinny jeans that don't fall down. That's my whole point in life.
They're the right length.
Yes, I have the worst. Again, you want to talk about minutia? I have 32, 34. Like I'm a 32, 34. You go to the store to find 32, 34s and like, sir, we don't stock those.
That's strange.
Yeah. It's like, hey, do you have a Chateaubriand 1932 in stock here at this local liquor store? I'm sorry, what? Just go in the back and see if you got anything in the wine cellar.
I did that once looking for a whiskey, and they're like, "Well, as a matter of fact,
no kidding."
Now it was a Benny's Beverage Depot in Chicago, so it was a big store. But I was like, "You wouldn't happen to have any?" And they're like, "Yeah, we do have a bottle. It's $150." I'm like, "I'll take it."
That's so America. What you just said is so American. Like, yes, we do have this vintage, beautiful bottle in the back at the liquor barn.
Right, exactly. Benny's Beverage Depot.
See, America is a convenience store. That's
what
we are. So then you're immediately labeled. Going back, you're immediately labeled. Then, oh, you're a Republican. I'm like, actually, I'm neither Republican nor Democrat. I resent both of them equally, which I covered in my sermon yesterday.
It's not quite hatred, but yes, resentment's a good word.
It's seething rage. How about that one? As you and I have talked off air, one of the things that I constantly pray for every day in morning prayers with my family is that I do not wish murder, literal assassination on these leaders.
Well, I mentioned that interview that Peterson did. I linked it in the show notes. Hurwitz is the guy's name, Greg Hurwitz. Okay. And his, they both agreed. Well, statistically, a typical American adult thinks about politics 4 minutes a week. And they both agreed that that's about right. That's where we want to be.
Right.
If it's working right, most people shouldn't have to think about it that much. They just get out of...
I was going to say, nowadays, it seems like people think about politics as much as they think about sex, or more so. Remember, it used to be like, well, people, men think about sex every 3 seconds or something.
It's not that exciting.
Well, it's because you're old and you have...
I'm talking about politics.
Oh, okay. Good night, everybody.
Set that one up.
Waiters, yeah.
Knock it out of the park. So easy.
But no, everything's exactly. Politics is boring.
So old. Well, and we've talked about this before on the show, but I realized it yesterday that Luther's 3 estates, which is actually what I preached on. Yeah. And specifically the 2, the church and the family, because that gets lost in the midst of the family. But it's like, these are the things that we're supposed to talk about. I think it's the things the Bible talks about, front to back. The church is obviously preeminent, but the family, I don't even know if you'd say it's a close second. It's almost, it's hard. The church is almost secondary to the family, really, in the way the narrative goes.
Well, how many churches even preach about family anymore?
Well, I know. You think about like, why defend the family? Because if you don't, it undermines your church and your state, ultimately.
What is it? A good family is the foundation of any stable society.
Well, that's the evidence of the scriptures, anyway.
Well, that too. Probably Dr. House.
Probably Dr. House.
No, it was like Thomas Jefferson or somebody said it, who was probably quoting some enlightenment philosopher. But anyways, the point
we've talked about this, that the philosophical presuppositions for an American style democracy,
right?
You might want to look those up,
right?
Because if you start throwing away, the things, the foundation, the whole thing is going to crumble.
Right.
That was
Well, I
kind
was
of my
reading
point.
an essay on the Academy of Ideas this morning about the difference between being a man and manhood. And,
Mhm.
they do a lot with Carl Jung, which is why I first
Yes, they
found my
do.
way there. And
Yeah.
speaking of abstract versus concrete, he kind of bridges those two. But talking about the reason then that there's not a lot of manhood anymore in American society is because, well, one of the reason is because the family's been completely destabilized and men are considered non-essential components of the
Hmm.
family, fathers. And second, we've all but eliminated the rights of manhood from our culture.
Is this cultivating heroic manhood?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
I'll
point
look it
is
up.
that their argument then is from history and tradition, manhood is something to be achieved. You don't just, because you're a biological male, you don't get to grow into manhood. You actually have to achieve it. It's something to actually be striven for.
I thought you just could live in your parents' basement and it would just come to you naturally.
I will tell you how that works out for my son and report back.
I posted on Facebook. I told you I was trying to break the algorithm
Mhm.
before we pushed record here on the
Right.
podcast.
Mhm.
One of the ways I did that is posted like four things you could do to make an impact on this world. And
Right.
one of them was get married, have kids,
Mhm.
and live within your means.
Right.
Very, very kind of Jordan Peterson,
How
stoic
dare
kind of
you?
approach.
You're
Right. But it's
obviously
true.
Republican.
Well,
Obviously.
like you want these young men to grow up.
I bet you
That's
have
the
a
way.
figurine. I bet you have a figurine on your desk right now of Jesus with a shotgun wrapped in an American flag. You do.
Yeah,
It's behind
no.
that green curtain. That's why you have that curtain up so that we can't see
See,
your tchotchkes.
you can't see all my American Jesus paintings.
I'm a collector. That's what I do.
I collect the memes. I've got them. I've
That's
got a
true.
whole folder
They're
of all the
phenomenal. They're
American Jesus
phenomenal.
stuff. Yeah.
But to the point of the law, then,
Hmm.
if you don't preach on this stuff and you simply say, you know what, family, sure, of
Right.
course it's important. Of course, we're traditional Christians in our church body. Of course, family's important. Is it when you never talk about it? Is manhood important if you never talk about it? For example, biblical manhood. Not to go too deep on this, but if I preach to the kids in confirmation class or in Sunday school, when you grow up, I want you to be like Gideon
Mm-hmm.
or
Right.
Barak,
Mm-hmm.
or I want you to be a warrior priest, right?
Defending people, defending the
Yeah.
faith. Yeah.
Not only that, but I want you to know how to fight. I
Well,
want
you
you to know
can't
how to
really defend if you don't know how to
right.
fight. Okay.
How many fathers are going to say, "Hey, man, you know what? The last thing that I need you doing is telling my kids that they should know how to shoot and how to build a fire from scratch and how to hunt and how to grow food in the garden and how to show up for their family and be a moral." Like that's my job. I'm like, well, obviously you're not doing your job because I have to teach
Yeah.
your kids
Do
are
your
like, what are you
job.
talking about?
It won't be a problem. Right.
Right? I'm like, well, why aren't you being a Gideon or a Barak? Why aren't you being a Samson?
It's the same with women, though.
Mhm.
I mean, it's both sexes. It's the
No,
same.
100%. I was just picking on my gender because this morning, again, man, I covered a lot of ground this morning. Somebody pointed out in Britain that all of the most prominent activists speaking up against and protesting the COVID lockdown are women. And the women are like, where are all the men?
Well, you saw this in the last election cycle, not with the presidency, maybe a little bit with the presidency, but definitely with all of the House and Senate races at the federal level.
Oh, geez, yeah.
How many?
Yeah.
I mean, you have these women coming in with guns,
Mhm.
and of course, getting in trouble because
Awesome.
apparently having a gun in the well of the house is a problem, I guess.
If you're not Capitol Police, apparently.
Well, they didn't even have guns. It was very strange.
Well, somebody shot her in the throat.
Oh, that's true.
We have the video.
We
She
do
was
have the
held up to that
video
window
by two other cops.
by two other cops. Babbitt was assassinated, by the way, people.
We
Go
weren't
find the
supposed to
video.
see that part.
Of course. Well, we weren't supposed to see the Capitol Police escorting Tatanka Man into the chambers either.
That video is insane. You'll get banned on Twitter if you post it.
I know, which tells you exactly
Close to over the target.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's in one of the articles I was reading on Academy of Ideas this morning of when, or no, the Frank Zappa quote.
Oh yeah,
Frank, they don't care anymore that we know, because we can't do anything about it because we become so emasculated and neutered as a culture. We're like, yeah, whatever. That's what they do.
that was the goal, was to get
That
to the
was
point
it,
where
yeah.
you couldn't do anything anymore.
Right. It's like if they came out today and said, yeah, we faked the whole moon landing thing because of the radiation belt, Van Allen radiation belt, and we couldn't take film through it at the time. And I'm like, hey, if you went to the moon, cool. If you circled the moon, cool. If you got close to the moon, I'm like, that's pretty cool for the fact that you had like a calculator in a spaceship for a computer. Stop lying about the film. Okay, just stop lying about it. And today they could totally be like, yeah, we lied. And yeah, we can solo with Stanley Kubrick. What's your point?
Well, somebody was saying that Trump should declassify in his last day or two here of office, declassify the JFK files.
100%.
Well, and that would be fantastic, but it won't even matter.
Right. Well, you and I were talking about that. The CIA is like, yeah, we rigged the election. And everyone's like, they just admit they rigged the election. And everyone's like, it's like that scene from Jurassic Park, the famous meme from Jurassic Park. No one cares. Where they're sitting at the table and he has the shaving cream can with the DNA in it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The guy's like, hey, man, what are you doing? He's like, no one cares. Hey, I have DNA. He's like, see, no one cares. The CIA is like, yeah, we totally did that. And everyone's like, and you and I are like, it's an act of war. And everyone's like, whatever, dude.
It is pretty incredible.
You're like, China and the CIA colluded to interfere in Italy right now, the entire government's on the brink of collapse.
Because of collusion with the Chinese government.
Yeah. In the American election.
Well, it wasn't just the American election.
I read the rest of
what
it
was
too.
it, like $1.75 billion? And then they gave how many 10 million, 18, 20 million kickback to a politician. And
it's literally destroying their entire governmental system in Italy and Germany.
Our election.
Correct. Meanwhile, in this country, we're about to install an authoritarian dictator because the republic is dead and no one cares.
No, this is actually more brilliant. It's not an authoritarian dictator.
An authoritarian.
Yeah, it's a panel or
well, from now on it will be. It's like any dystopian movie where the glorious leader is the wizard. Like you see his picture everywhere and you see him on video everywhere, but then of course the protagonist gets behind the curtain and you realize this guy's been dead for 40 years or he's on life support in the corner.
Well, that was 1984. What was the guy's name? That it was based on? It's actually based on a Russian character. I can't remember his name. A real life guy where they kept printing stuff from him after he was dead. Yeah. It doesn't even matter.
What would you know? I mean, well, we know this for a fact because you look at FDR. Eleanor was president for at least a year and a half.
It was a long time.
Because he was in bed. He wasn't functional.
And that's how we got the 25th Amendment.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Good job, guys. Well done. And again,
now it doesn't even matter. I mean, we don't even need a 25th Amendment because we've got deep fakes.
I was going to say, because what's her face, that rep is like, yeah, I'm filing impeachment papers against Biden day one.
Was that
same chick who carries a gun?
Yeah, the one from Colorado.
Yeah, she's hardcore. I love her. She's fantastic.
She's not going to make it very far.
No, she's not.
I mean, she'll make it far with people who support her.
She'll be the Tulsi Gabbard of the GOP.
I think that's actually the hope for me. Speaking of propaganda, is that enough truth can be said that there'll be people who will flip
on both sides. That's the thing is, I wonder if this won't create that quote unquote America's party or whatever with the lion symbol or whatever of saying like all the disenfranchised Democrats, all the disenfranchised Republicans, we're going to meet in the middle.
Yeah. And actually have a moderate party.
Problem is, again, funding and the gerrymandering.
Right. Because obviously there's no more corporate funding for the Republican Party.
Right. Well, again, I live in Minnesota. They've been gerrymandering for 40, like almost 100 years, actually.
And they're working on it here too. Yeah.
I mean, it's a closed system in Minnesota. If you're a Republican in Minnesota, in my opinion, if you're a Republican in Minnesota, you basically got to play the Democrat playbook to get not only elected, but to stay elected. It's just a fact. Like when they voted on the stimulus bill here to rebuild Minneapolis, which is just me paying more taxes, across the board, it was voted for. Republicans voted for it. Democrats voted for it. And we're like, we have a $4 billion deficit in the state. Why did you just vote for $1.4 million when you said you needed $500 million from the Fed?
Well,
Well, you see, there's lots of ins and outs and what have you. It's kind of a complicated case, man. And you're like, all I know is you're going to raise my taxes next year. And most of that money is going to actually go somewhere else because you're going to sell that land to investors to gentrify, just like you did with the stadium downtown.
We'll put Paul's comment back up on the screen in case anybody missed the...
Puts on, there we go, Paul. Thank you. You should. Well-worn tinfoil hat. I like that.
You could just make a new one. It's okay.
I was going to say, that should be on a t-shirt, though. It's like, hold on. Let me put on my well-worn tinfoil hat. I like that. That's fantastic. So so here's the point then. Actually, that's a great point that Paul brings up. And we may never get to this episode, but who cares? It's our podcast. Enjoy. Again, shout out to everybody in China and North Korea that's illegally streaming this because we know you're there. We see it. Is what if at this point, most of these conspiracies that you and I have been called conspiracy theorists about, they're all true now. They're out in the open. Like I said, the politicians are like, yeah, I totally did that.
Yep.
Yeah, Chappaquiddick, yeah, I was totally there. I totally killed her. Whatever. Or LBJ, you're like, yeah, he was involved in the assassination of JFK with the CIA, and you're like, yeah, 100%. And what are you going to do about it? Or again, the CIA saying, yeah, we colluded with China to rig the American election because we hate Trump because he cut off our money supply from the Mexican drug cartels.
Right.
And you're like, no, that's crazy conspiracy stuff. And you're like, boom, 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 boom. Here's all the declassified information.
What happened to the opioid crisis? Oh, yes.
Exactly.
We cut off the opioids from getting in from China and from Mexico. Yeah.
So conspiracy theory is now conspiracy fact. It's just a conspiracy.
Right.
And we can prove it because it's all public information. And now the conspiracy theorists are, well, at least in my current experience, oh, do you really think that vitamin D3 actually will help you build your immune system up? What are you, insane? Are you a conspiracy theorist? Are you one of those nutty, like woo-woo hippie people that praise the crystals? Because you believe that your immune system prevents you from getting sick? And I'm like, I was actually taught that my entire life.
Not the crystal part, the vitamin D part.
No, that'd be crystal meth. But no.
I thought you had a big piece of Himalayan salt. I want to get one of those because it's like the new lava lamp, right?
I know, but they are pretty cool.
They are pretty cool.
You know, and then you can lick it if you're bored, whatever. But
like a cow,
right? Exactly. But what do you do now that I was raised to learn how to grow a garden. I was raised to learn how to hunt. I was raised to learn how to sew and knit so I could fix my clothes if I needed to. I grew up learning how to work on cars so I could do basic maintenance on my car. Like all this stuff that we used to call common sense, or just like these are things that you have to know. Like when you and I were in high school, we were taught how to balance a checkbook and how to have a bank account. Like we're taught this stuff. And you can call it indoctrination into, different things. But the point is like when I got out of high school, I had a checking and a savings account and I had a checkbook and I understood like I have to keep this balanced.
You do?
Well, by the end of my freshman year of college, that whole theory went out the window when I got a credit card, but because they didn't teach us that in high school. But no, now it's like, I tell people, I'm like, well, how's your, do you take zinc? How's your electrolyte levels? Do you take care of your gut and brain, like your gut and intestinal flora? And they're like, what? And again, it's like, oh, you hippie.
This is not hippie science.
It's not, but it is if 95% of your diet comes out of a box.
Who was I gonna? It's that gal that's been on Rogan like 100 times.
Oh, Rhonda Patrick.
Really good stuff.
Gosh, she's so good.
She does the work. She does the work. And she's not like preferential to homeopathic or natural remedy, but she is.
She's very scientific. She's very analytical.
I think so.
And she's very quick to say, well, there's not a lot of research on this, so I'm just kind of speculating or speaking anecdotally, which I appreciate about it. I'd say everything that I've just said to you is basically from Rhonda Patrick or Rob Wolf.
Right.
Those are the two big ones for me.
Found my fitness. Okay.
She's fantastic though. And I can hardly wait to see what her kid turns out to be.
Well, she totally life hacked her pregnancy. Yeah.
Totally. It's fascinating. And she's so adorable. She's so cute because she's just so like guileless. It's just funny because especially being on Rogan.
That's a funny word that you used. I was thinking about that word this morning. Being guileless. Like where's our politicians that are without guile? I've been, the scriptures demanded of the pastors. It's a qualification to be a pastor, right? To be without guile. And like apparently it's not for politicians,
right?
It's like because I mean that's ultimately Trump's failure. I think
that he doesn't have any guile.
He has no guile. He has the ego the size of like a demigod, right?
Right.
And that people don't respond well to that.
Which
even
I
if he's right.
My emperors, I'm just saying. Like,
oh yeah, no. If you're gonna be an emperor, that would be great.
Just don't go full Commodus on me, but yeah, I mean.
But unfortunately, it's probably the right person for the right time for this country. He's the coroner, not the murderer.
Right.
He's just declaring what's already true. But on the other. Yeah, go ahead. No, fine.
I was going to say, as an aside, Marcus Aurelius, wonderful Stoic, great thinker, terrible judge of character. The people that he chose to succeed him you're like, what are you really? Like, you wrote all this great stuff, and really, that's the guy? This murderous, genocidal psychopath? That's the guy?
That kind of describes the last 4 years, though.
It really does.
Just one after another.
Again,
Who's left?
George Carlin, man. They don't care about you. They hate you and they think you're stupid. It's just we don't have any public. That's the point, right? We don't have public intellects anymore.
It was a good show.
Which one?
the last 4 years. Yeah.
Well, exactly. It was a reality TV show, which is a whole nother side note to the whole conspiracy theory thing too. Of like reality TV has just become reality at this point.
Of all the stories that'll be written about, the history of this country and the millennia to come, will it stand up as one of the preeminent stories?
No,
with the moon landing or anything like that?
And rewritten and revised that it won't even be close to the truth.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're already there. They're already rewriting history.
Yeah, I suppose.
And the news media, I mean, they just like the whole Capitol riot thing. It's not a riot, you idiot. They let them in the building. They walked them through the building. They stay inside the red ropes.
Some of them.
I've seen a riot.
No, some of them didn't. I mean, it's true. Yeah. There's a multiplicity.
The agent provocateurs did damage on purpose.
And people who came along with them.
Right. Exactly. Because it's that herd mentality.
Right.
Diffusion of responsibility. As a consequence, and I guess we'll just segue in now, what happens though is that what history will be, in my opinion, is what history is, which is propaganda. Because the old saying, history is written by the victors, is really just a polite way of saying history is written by the propagandists, meaning the people who win are going to rewrite history. Let's go back in time and ask a Roman about Hannibal. What do you think about the Carthaginians? What about Hannibal? I'm sure they said he was a coward and a monster and he ate children and blah, blah, blah. Scripted reality. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. It's scripted reality because someone's literally writing a script and then an empty vessel is mouthing the words of the script in politics, media, whatever it might be. And then you're like, that's reality, that because they're reporting on the truth. And you're like, I'm literally looking outside right now. That's not happening. No, 100%. Again, mostly peaceful protest. I'm like, your city's on fire, dude. Right behind you. And he's like, no, it's not.
So we've been, I'd say been highly critical of the language games that are being played.
Well, because you and I are paid to literally handle language.
Right. I was going to say that you could put it under the broad category of literacy, and you see, we've done this in our school, or we did this in our school to get a grant, say, well, we could frame everything in terms of literacy. So even something like political literacy, musical literacy, scriptural literacy, catechetical literacy, right? It's like, can you read? In other words, can you hear or with your eyes, read words and deconstruct them, say, what do they mean?
Right.
What's the aim? What's the objective of this statement? What's being done here? And we're just not very good at it.
The first thing I think I've talked about here, but if not, the first thing that we had to do when we decided to homeschool is look for critical thinking books for every subject for our kids.
Oh yeah. Logic, rhetoric. Yeah.
Because one of the things that motivated us to pull our kids out finally is my oldest son is a genius level IQ. So he's autodidactic to the extreme, right? So he's just like, my teachers aren't answering my questions. I'm going to go learn how to think. So he just did.
Right.
My daughter is my personality. She's an artist and a musician. So she's all over the place. And she's missing stuff. She's not being taught how to think. But at the same time, she's like, in my mind right now, I have just created the most beautiful castle. And you're like, oh, I'm focused. She's like, I am focused on building this castle in my mind.
Well, there's both, right?
No, but I'm just saying, though, that for her, critical thinking is, I'm just going to go imagine a better world because I'm obviously dumb because I don't understand this. Whereas for my oldest son, he's not like, oh, I'm not getting it, so I must be dumb. He's saying, I'm not getting it because they're not giving me the information. And he challenged me at chess when he was 4. He learned how to play chess from me. And then at 4, I'm like, hey, you little shit. You're 4. You're not allowed to be, you can't tie your own shoes. You're not allowed to beat me at chess. So with Alma then, and then with my younger ones, we realized, okay, they haven't been taught how to think. They haven't been taught how to learn. So therefore, we're giving them subjects that they've struggled with previously, and we're not giving them the tools to thrive and survive and to be successful in these subjects. Right. So then we bought how to think critically about math, how to think critically about science, and so forth. And within a couple of weeks, it was like trying to get someone to exercise for the first time in their life, where they're just like, oh, this is hard, and we hate it. It's so stupid. We won't go back to school. But then after it clicked, after about 4, 5, 6 weeks, then the preceding 6 weeks of a 12-week curriculum, all of a sudden they're just boom off to the races. And now they're like, oh, why can we have school like all through the summer? Can we do school 6 days a week?
But what you mean by how to think critically is you're not
Mhm.
saying, here's the conclusions that you ought to come to.
Correct.
But instead it's, here's the framework by which you can approach and understand reality.
Right. My middle school daughter's history books. The history book is written narratively and it's written inductively or deductively. I'm sorry.
Right.
So at the end of the chapter, then there's questions. What did
But they
you
already
read?
told you what the answer is.
Is it inductive where they don't give you the answers?
Yes.
Yes. So it's inductive.
Inductive. No, deductive gives you the conclusion at the front end.
Okay. So this is inductive because at the end they're like, okay, explain what you just read. Here's all the things that we want you to know.
What's the conclusion then?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And my
they
daughter's
lead you
like-
to the conclusion.
Yeah. And at first my daughter's crying on the couch because she's like,
Mhm.
I don't understand this. He's like, the way he writes, I can't follow what I'm like, yeah, because you're functionally illiterate.
Because you wanted, here's the conclusion, here's 3 points to support the conclusion, and here's the conclusion again.
Right.
That's deductive.
Which is essentially every movie and TV show that's made right now is like, they just have to walk you by the hand. That's why there's exposition dumps. And the teacher for my middle school daughter, her teachers are just long exposition dumps.
Right.
And so then when you take all that away and go, okay, now think for yourself. And she's like, wait, what? I'm like, I thought I was. And I'm like, no, you're not capable of thought.
Right.
But now she sees it. And like I told you, I'm like, she is the most dangerous person in the room if you bring up the public school system
I think,
or
you know,
COVID or whatever, because she does research now and she listens to audiobooks. And while she's reading a book, she listens to audiobooks. So if she's at church and she's in Bible study and you bring something up,
right.
she is like, you made that comment to me, like there's like about, homeschoolers with a lot of information.
Yeah. High information.
Yeah. High information homeschoolers, like super dangerous to get in a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Because it's like asking me about jujitsu or Muay Thai. You're like, do you have 3 hours? Because if not, do not ask this question because I'm going to go off.
The slightly autistic, high information homeschoolers.
There we go. Yes.
Somewhere on the spectrum. I think that's the word I used.
Yes. 100%. They put themselves there. So what do you do though? Then, and as a parent, then when you have now put your kids in a position to be that way, and they now realize, oh, I'm an alien. Like I don't see the world the way that other people see the world. Plus, I'm a Christian, so I don't see humanity the way that other people see humanity. Even like I was talking about with the truth, like differentiating between little t and big T truth, and that history is propaganda. That everything that you see on the news is propaganda. That it's all being written for you. Your reality is being scripted. And
True story.
And like Cypher in the Matrix, then, do you choose to go back in the Matrix? Because, I know it's not steak, but it tastes delicious. I need to go along so I can get along. Or do you say no more? And because if you say no more, the amount of personal sacrifice is immense because you have to change your entire life.
I think it's true.
It's like if you're diagnosed with stage 2 or diabetes, for example, type 2 diabetes, sorry, are you willing to change your entire life to not have diabetes anymore? Or do you just take the insulin? It's preventable. Type 2 diabetes is entirely preventable.
I mean, this is likened unto faith, isn't it? Where you have, the easy road.
Right.
And then as we talked about in our episodes on Pilgrim's Progress, right?
Yeah.
Or do you go through the narrow gate, go on the one path, and it's not going to be easy, and all the ways that the Bible likens it to it. I mean, there's murderers, there's robbers and thieves.
Yeah. Vanity Fair is right there waiting for you.
Yeah. And
then likewise, or on a similar note, because I've heard this before is, well, in the end of the day, I'm going to heaven anyways, Pastor. So why not, why be so serious about these things when we die, we're going to heaven anyways.
Well, it's because you don't take seriously the way that they assault faith.
Right.
Right. So you think that, as the article in our last episode, we were, or the sermon, I guess it was, that we read, can both coexist? Can you be a communist and be a Christian?
Nope.
That was his conclusion. I think we agree. That
one is godless.
Exactly. Yeah. So it does undermine faith. I posted on my Facebook wall, and I got a few responses to this. I gotta remember what it's called. The Society, or no, it's some group within the Democratic Party that are socialists, Oh no, they want us to be secular. They want America to be restored as a secular nation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, you have to rewrite history a little bit for that to be successful.
Right.
But what is the quote here? Let's see if I can find it. It's on my wall. Dun, 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 dun. I'm scrolling down. I posted a lot of things today. I'm making Anne aggravated because she's only seeing my posts. All right, here's what they say. We urge you not to underestimate the institutional strength of what we refer to interchangeably in this document as the Christian nationalist movement or the religious right. Now, we've been critical of the religious right, but anyway. This movement is an extraordinarily well-funded, well-organized, and the manifestation of its extreme and sectarian agenda is on a constant display under the Trump-Pence administration. Its political ideology is anti-democratic and anti-scientific. It provides constant cover for white supremacy, and it advances a reactionary economic policy, tax policy, and dominationalist, is that a word? I guess
Dominationalist?
Dominationist view of the environment that undermines our capacity and will to address the climate crisis. Its agenda rests on a pinched interpretation of biblical principles preached by the Christian nationalist leadership and thought leaders. With their political agendas sanctioned by a higher power, their base of support is disciplined, motivated, and deeply committed to a vision that does not align with our basic constitutional values and democratic principles. And that's something.
Good quote by King that you posted up there too.
Yeah, it's a good quote by King. So the point, I thought you didn't have a Facebook account.
I don't. You posted it right here on the sidebar from Ben.
Oh, I did. Look at that. So anyway, this quote, it's from the document.
This is what I have to work with, people.
It's from this document, Secular Democrats of America. And, you have to rewrite history. It's interesting because I would share quite a few of their reactions to the what do they call it? The religious right or the Christian nationalist movement.
Yeah.
We've been critical of people who've co-opted the Bible, as a rallying cry, to defend the president or something. It's just like, now you're pushing the envelope here a little bit.
Pretty hard. Yeah. Pretty hard.
But it's also just interesting how, that one line in there, never mind white supremacy. That's kind of silly. I don't know why they put that in.
Well, that's, listen to the Jocko Willink podcast recently about freedom, where he reads the appendix to 1984. And that's one of the things that is brought up from 1984 is that because people are not capable of thought, everything is just reduced to these two binary points of enemy, ally. So in the present tense then, and ironically in 48, he says the same thing. If you disagree with me, if you're conservative, you're a Nazi. And if you're a liberal, you're a communist. And the problem with that then is, like we alluded to earlier, if I say, I think it's super important that nobody in my community be homeless or be hungry, and that every child should never go to bed hungry at night. Yeah. Therefore, we need to have social programs in place to prevent this from happening. Well, you're a communist because it's their parents' responsibility for taking care of them and making sure that they have food. It's about accountability.
Well, it is, but
there are circumstances, and we need to make sure there's a net there to catch the most vulnerable and weakest in our society and help them rise above that station.
And you might even subsidize churches to help do that.
Oh, stop it.
Now you're confusing the two kingdoms.
Exactly. But that's when you reduce everything to binary terms, then everything on that side of the street or that side of the house is communism. Everything on this side of the house is Nazism, which is ironic because Nazi is, of course, not a real word. It's a compound of several words, which is also 1984. Is that one of the ways that you engage in propaganda and how you manipulate people is to abbreviate everything and make compound words out of words so that they lose all meaning. So the word Nazi, if I'm like, oh, you're a Nazi, it actually has no meaning other than you're the bad guy. You're the enemy. Remember a couple of years ago, the big thing was, meme was, you know who else liked water? Hitler.
I remember that.
Right? Because at that time, it wasn't you're a Nazi. It was like, it was a Nazi in the sense of like, oh, you sound just like Adolf Hitler.
This reminds me, I didn't realize that I pulled this out of 1984. I don't know, or maybe it was out of a conversation, but I unarchived it. I had it posted on my wall. I've been trying to bait people and see what happens. What did I say? I said binary thinking is a sign of religious zealotry. And boy, did I get myself, I didn't respond to anybody, but it just blew up because people were like, no, God made us male and female. I'm like, well, okay, true. That's binary. Right.
But not binary thinking.
That's correct.
It does have the same word in it, though. Thank you for bringing that up.
So, how many comments on here? 30 comments. Oh, and it just went back and forth.
Silly.
Well, and Jesus does say you're either with me or you're against me. I get that.
Hmm?
No, yeah. But
But
binary thinking.
Mhm.
When if you approach people in a binary way, it's basically a recipe for
right.
what the life we're in right now. Yes.
Well, it's like the movie where they're standing guard, right? Maybe it's like a medieval movie, and they're standing guard, and it's dark out there. They hear movement, and then they're like, who goes there, friend or foe?
Right.
And then you walk into the light, you're like, friend or foe. And then they either fire on you or they let you come into camp.
And how could you tell the difference anyway? Just by the words?
Apparently. But they're
What
like,
if they-
they're like, friend or foe, and they're like, friend, and like, show yourself. And then they come out of the dark, and they're like, okay, you look like us, so we'll let you in.
Like, haven't you watched movies? You just
Right? Have you
you
not
take your
watched
enemy.
movies?
You just you take your enemy's uniform and you put it on. I mean, it's in Star Wars. I mean, it's everywhere.
I know.
Dress like a stormtrooper. I mean, then they won't catch you.
Dumb medieval people. What are you thinking? Yeah. So let's read this now. This is from the same sermon that we've been covering the last couple episodes or several episodes.
Uh-huh.
We're on propaganda, which is more important than the truth. So another sign of communistic infiltration is an assumption that propaganda is more important than truth. That this communist doctrine, or that this is a communist doctrine, I don't need to argue. It has been stated in their official documents that anything is good that puts their cause forward, and anything is bad that holds it back. Which is exactly when somebody got up and walked out of church yesterday.
Ah. Oh, had you already read this? Yes.
Yes. If the lie will help the cause, then tell the lie. And since there is no divine law to worry about, the communists are committed to the doctrine that the end justified the means.
Ooh.
And I talked about that, right? There's little L law and big L law.
Yeah.
Right.
Law unto you and law unto me.
Right.
Yeah.
But regardless, there is a law. There is a set of rules that govern all of us so that we can all objectively get along.
Right.
So
Well, that was my suggestion in the sermon, is that marriage is one of those instituted by God for our benefit, whether we believe that or not.
Right.
Right. And he orders, he writes it on the heart of all mankind, many cultures, not just Christian ones,
Right.
honor that, or Jewish ones or whatever, Islam to some degree.
Right.
We know it. Everybody knows that this is the best way. That doesn't mean that you always go along with it.
It's not convenient.
Yeah. Often.
For us, often. So we have watched Russia march forward over broken promises and disregarded treaties. At the root of much of our trouble is the distrust which springs out of disillusioning experiences with men who make propaganda more important than truth.
Define propaganda, by the way. Where does that come from?
That's a good question. We should.
It says here, I used the British English dictionary. Information. Go ahead.
Point out for our listeners that Merriam-Webster has been rewriting the definitions of words on purpose.
Absolutely. That's why I use Oxford English. Information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a political cause or point of view. So it may even be true, a fact. That's an important point. But like in a courtroom, I mean, you have I said this in Bible class, you have a defendant and you have, prosecutor. They both present the facts, because if they present something that's false factually, they'll disqualify their case, right? Or they'll, or the judge will, or the opponent will overrule them, whatever, right? So they present the facts, but they present the facts in such a way to lead to a particular truth or conclusion, right?
Right.
That they'd like to prove.
Here are the 7 techniques of propaganda, as laid out by Morgan Crouch. This is 1937. Edward Filene helped establish the Institute of Propaganda Analysis.
What did you call it again?
Edward.
7.
It's the 7 techniques of propaganda.
Okay.
Outlined by Edward Filene in 1937 at the Institute of Propaganda Analysis. Side note, last spring, Congress acted to do away with the law that prevented the United States government from waging a campaign of propaganda against its own citizens. So it's actually legal for them to use propaganda against us now.
I thought it was legal and then it isn't, but now it is again?
Yeah.
Because the law expired, but then they just renewed it.
Correct.
Okay. Who'd you say? Filene?
Yeah, Edward Filene, Filene.
All right, I'll try to find it here.
Institute of Propaganda Analysis. Number 1, name calling. Using negative or discriminatory words, propagandists arouse suspicion and prejudice. Number 2, glittering generality. Using slogans or simple catchphrases, propagandists make generalized statements attractive to their audience. Transfer. which this is my favorite one because I'm constantly pointing this out, that politicians
Transference, yeah.
they're constantly blaming the other person for what they themselves do. A transfer associates a revered symbol with an idea that the propagandist wants to promote, such as a flag, for example. Oh, that's different than transference, I'm sorry. So a transfer is, hey, this symbol, the American flag, right? Hey, we're going to kneel and protest of police brutality. Why do you hate the troops? What?
Yeah, and we did the thin blue line was another one, right?
Yep, it is right now.
Yeah.
So transfer. Testimonial is number 4. A testimonial makes an association between a respected or authoritative person and the cause.
Okay.
Like,
so I heard him say,
right.
Okay.
Well, it's like, well, Che Guevara did this. Che Guevara said that. Yeah, he also murdered homosexuals.
Right. So they can be positive or negative testimonials.
Right. It doesn't matter. It's an appeal to authority, which is also a logical fallacy.
Correct.
5, plain folks. The goal of this technique is to convince the audience that the spokesman is like them and shares their woes and concerns, which you should be familiar with because, well, at least for the past year or so, that's kind of been Trump's populist appeal.
Right.
Like we said, he's a raging narcissist.
And he's not a plain folk.
No, he's never been. He was born rich.
That's right.
No. Number 5, that was plain folks. Number 6, bandwagon. This technique capitalizes on the human drive to be part of a crowd, a member of the winning team. Yep.
Biggest rallies ever.
Yep. Okay. Most popular president ever. Yep.
Most votes ever.
Most votes ever. Number 7, card stacking. By using only those facts that support their ideas, propagandists can make it seem that their way is the only correct way. This is also characteristic of religious dogmatism and cults. Actually, any cult, not just religious cults, but 1, name calling, 2, glittering generalities, 3, transfer, meaning, this symbol represents all of this.
The cross, the empty cross, whatever it is. Yeah.
Or just a flag or a thing. 4, testimonial. 5, hey, I'm just plain folk just like you. Snake oil salesman. 6, bandwagon, and 7, card stacking. That's, this is every cult.
Wow.
When
so there's a universality to this. It's not just
I would say so.
Political.
I mean, religiously speaking, I think you and I are both, 1, guilty of this at different times, and 2, recognize it.
Right.
Not just in the present tense, but historically, you're like, oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, we've seen this before.
But I think to the point then, before we dive back into the sermon, if you understand these 7 points of propaganda, I think it actually would prepare you critically thinking wise, to actually recognize the BS when it crops up. Where you're like, well, it's like my wife said this about 1.5 years ago. Because we were talking with my daughter and she came home and she was talking about how her teachers were explaining how Donald Trump's a dictator and a fascist and all these things. And we're like, wait, your teacher said these things? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, what evidence did he use? What primary text did he use? And she's like, well, none. I'm like, well, then how do you know this is true? Well, because all my friends say it too. And I'm like, okay, so you just clicked off 2 of the 7 here. Have you ever listened to Donald Trump speak? No. Have you ever read anything that he's written? No. Have you ever talked with anyone who's pro-Trump? No. Okay. So maybe we should all do that together as a family.
Yeah.
Right.
Critically, of course.
Critically thinking and speaking wise. And that's what my wife pointed out. She's like, all these things that the media is saying about Trump, when I listen to him speak, blah, blah, I don't hear those things happening. I don't see those things. So is there something I'm missing?
Right.
And I'm like, no, there's just no primary evidence. They're just saying things based on their perception. And then you're seeing things and observing things because you don't really have the same perception of him as these people do. And you're coming to a different conclusion. Doesn't mean you're right. It just means you have a different perception. So now we have to drill down and figure out, is your perception observably true, or is it just your perception? It's your judgment of him.
Where does projection fit into this? Because it's we confuse that with transference.
Yeah.
But it's something else, right?
Yeah.
Where you almost, because you can, I think it's that false flag. It's the flag point where you say, you keep saying things about your opponent to the point. But the problem is you become what you say about them.
You are. I think that's the point. It's like when you or I, anecdotally speaking, when someone comes to us and says, I really don't like the way you teach Bible study, and here's why. And you hear them actually outline themselves. They actually do a breakdown. They perform like a pathology on their personality.
Okay.
And they don't see or more specifically, because I brought this up in the Galatians Bible study yesterday. When someone comes to me for confession and they only talk about other people, and I listen, and then I ask, okay, but what about you? I thought you came for personal confession. Pastor, I just got done telling you about all of the reasons that I'm here. I'm here because of
everybody else.
Because of everybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's naive. Yeah.
but that's the move, is to say, yeah, if it wasn't for all these, and so, my advice is like, move to a deserted island and see how that works. Maybe it'll work.
You don't have any choice. You have to live with other people.
You do. And the difference between the imprecatory Psalms, for example, and the personal confession of Psalm 51 is, I'm not saying I'm not a sinner. I'm just saying I'm not a perpetrator of that sin.
Right.
Versus he definitely committed that sin because I committed. And I actually use this as an example of, if I blame my council president for everything, I just have to get you to believe me one time to start the ball rolling downhill.
Right. Exactly.
And if I can get you to believe the first lie, guess what? After that, it's going to just grow. So I get a promotion because Jim's always asleep down by the furnace and he's never doing his job and he's late for work and he goes home early and he takes extra long lunch hours. And I keep getting promoted. And then I'm like, well, Jim, that's just the way he is. And at a certain point, everyone's like, that's just Jim, versus actually that's me. And I just transferred all that onto Jim. So now Jim represents the worst of all of us. Don't be like Jim.
Well, that's why I described Trump as a coroner, because he's probably the worst of what he does represent, some of the best, but also a lot of the worst of American politics. Mm-hmm. And he revealed it. He exposed it. He called it the swamp, right? Yeah. And whether it was all just a game, in a sense, to just before last hurrah for him as he's growing older, to show everybody what what's been true all along. We just didn't realize it. Right.
It's chaos theory.
Yeah, maybe chaos theory, or just being the entertainer. Are you entertained?
Yeah, right.
Well, no, not really, because it's my future now. But
here's the point. That's a great point that you raise. To go off on that, though, is go back to the reality TV and scripted reality. We want to be entertained, right? This is Huxley's Brave New World. We've got our drugs, now entertain us with mindless entertainment. And Trump gave us what we wanted, which is mindless entertainment, which is why I think he's so popular.
Yeah, but now it's like, oh, how are you going to outdo that when you're almost at least senile old man that can barely move?
Let's go with dystopian sci-fi movie.
I think, like, who's writing the script? Somebody's writing these scripts. Right. And they're saying, well, what can we try next? Oh yeah, let's do a military occupation of DC.
Yeah, let's do that.
It's like, that was actually Trump's idea, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Or no, was it your idea? No, you did telegraph that. You talked about how he was going to stage a military coup.
Correct.
So we'll just do one instead.
Right.
Like,
and by him, I mean we.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of co-conspirators, obviously.
Well, and it's exhausting at a certain point, which is why I think so many people who do tune in and start to kind of creep around the edge go, oof, this seems like a big investment of mental time.
And that was Hayward's thread today. I mean, he was talking about comparing the shy Trump voter to the, basically, I think he said fatigued Biden voter, maybe. It wasn't fatigued. He used the word just tired. I think he said tired Biden voter. It was like people are just tired with the show. Yeah. And so then they just vote for the other guy.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's consequences to that.
I'm going to say that's the problem with every TV show that hits, is that it's only got 2 or 3 good seasons.
Oh, yeah.
And then it starts to go downhill.
Well, it's like,
people tune out because they move on to the next big show. The next
Indiana Jones is a franchise, isn't it? Yeah. Second season, not so great. Third season, pretty good. Enjoyed it. And like, that would have been good. Just wrap it there. Yeah. It was called The Last Crusade. I mean,
right. Exactly. You did it. You okay? Stop. But no.
Die Hard was that way.
Oh, yeah. After 2, they should have just stopped. So many. Rambo. Yeah. Terminator.
Just keep.
Yeah.
Rocky 4, though.
Oh, that's a good movie.
It's possible.
Yeah. Anyways, so Russia marching forward, broken promises, disregarded treaties. Just substitute the word China for Russia. It's the same thing today.
Correct.
And I brought that up in Bible study too. It's because the Revelation came up, and I'm like, here's the text of all of the subtext and thesis of Revelation is this: Jesus wins. That's literally the entire book's about. Jesus wins. because my old lady, her friend that, in the apartment building she lives in, she's like, man, my friend, she reads the Bible all the time. And she came over and she said, right there in the book of Revelation, it says that the yellow people are going to take over the world. And I looked at her and I went, what did you just say?
The lizard people?
No, yellow people. And then she's like, but I'm like, I didn't read that in there at all. And then she's like, but then she came back over this morning and said, oh, you know what? It wasn't in the Bible. It was in Nostradamus.
Gosh.
And I looked at her. I was like, yep, absolutely. Cool. Okay.
That's
I'm like, do you know who the mud people are? And she's like, oh, you're right. I'm like, yes, exactly. I'm like, they did this with black people for a long time to justify that black people are subhuman. They're the children of Cain, who, although the Bible says that the children of Cain were wiped out in the flood, we'll just say a few survived, or the children of, is it Canaan? Right? Was another one?
Oh, I don't know.
Whatever white supremacist reading of Genesis you pick, black people are not human. That's like the trajectory of that whole exegesis.
Is that
and
how
then
that
I'm like,
works?
I read Hebrew. I've read Genesis in Hebrew and German and Latin and Spanish. You know what I've never found? That. Like, I've never found that in any of my readings of this text.
True story.
Not even like it's an option in my translation choices. No, never. Zero. So you have to make a mental jump across the Grand Canyon of mental jumps to get from point A to black people aren't human beings because they're children of Cain or Canaan or whoever. I'm like, no. So number one, Revelation is about Jesus and only Jesus. Number two, notice how we always make it about ourselves. And three, what we should recognize is China, like when I was little in elementary school, it was Russia. Russia was in Revelation. Now China's taken over for Russia. I said, what it tells us is every government's the same. That's what it tells us. It's not like, oh, well, America's just like Rome. No, every empire is like Rome. The British, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Chinese, it doesn't matter.
Even the Davidic kingdom, by the way.
Yeah, but it's all the same government. So it's not the way like, oh, well, what's the prophecy about the present? No, it's simply pointing out it's always the same.
Reminds me of They Might Be Giants song.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's called Where's the Shadow Government When You Need Them?
Right. Well, Eric Weinstein brought that up on Twitter. You sent me that tweet.
I did.
Like we want our intelligence community to be off the grid, but at the same time, we want them to be fully transparent.
And you can't have it both ways.
Well, yeah. And it's like, and they're like, no, you don't, because then we'd have to kill all of you.
It is a challenge, right?
Oh,
if they're going to keep things from American citizens to
right.
protect them,
right,
then they're also going to keep the truth from them.
And speaking of the CIA, I do not think any of us are so naive as not to know that our government uses espionage. But the inept and bungling way the U2 incident was handled fills some of us with despair.
Look it up, kids.
Yep. What a defense we made. We confess that maybe we do spy, but so do they. Maybe we lie, but so do they. And the world looks on and sees very little to choose between these two powerful Goliaths. When we lose our moral leadership, we lose our most effective weapon. If we cannot say to the world that we do hold higher moral standards than Russia, we are in a bad way. People need to believe that America speaks the truth.
Okay, we got to talk about this.
Yes, we do.
So I was thinking about it this morning with propaganda. What's the flip side of propaganda? What's the other side of the coin? When propaganda doesn't work, well, you only have propaganda when you need to fill a vacuum that you've created with censorship.
Censorship, yep.
Yep, they always go hand in hand, right? They did in Soviet Russia, they do in China.
Right.
So this is how it works, because even in the case of what the scriptures teach, what cannot stand the truth or the light?
Yeah,
the darkness, right?
Yeah.
But so then the only way you can allow the lie to persist, or actually prevent, or keep the lie persisting, I guess that's how you do it, is to eliminate the truth, right? Which requires censorship.
Right. So this is where...
do we really want the truth? I mean, that's the question.
Yeah. Right.
If we knew the truth about, pick your conspiracy theory or actual conspiracy, right? The one of the things we talked about in our pre-show. Let's
just go with fluoride in the drinking water, since that's a controversial one.
Fluoride. Well, you could do flint. You could actually do a real life one.
Aluminum goes to your brain, causes Alzheimer's. Since we talked about autism earlier.
Okay, there you go.
Same thing. Autism, Alzheimer's caused by aluminum going to the brain.
Marisol, by the way.
Marisol, fluoride. It's in the water. It's there to anesthetize you. Let's say that's true. Hypothetically, let's say the CIA is like, no, 100%. We've been trying to anesthetize you for decades with fluoride in the water. Okay, now what?
What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. Oh no, we're totally going to keep doing it because you can't. It's like the guy from the Joint Chiefs of Staff said. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and the intelligence community we are the government. He said that out loud.
Well,
you and
in
I
writing
both,
anyway.
well, in writing, but I'm just like, you and I both knew that. And everyone's like, you guys are nuts. I'm like, he literally just wrote it down on paper. He literally said it out loud. And you're like, oh, yeah.
Are you actually a branch of government?
Right, exactly. No,
I thought there were only 3.
Amazon, Twitter.
Didn't I send you I sent you a meme about that.
One. Yeah, 3 branches of government and who pays for them. But so in Huxley, especially in Brave New World Revisited, which no one reads, but it's superior because it's his reflection on what happened since he wrote Brave New World. In Huxley's dystopian future, it's soma, it's drugs and mindless entertainment that's going to enslave us, like today. But in Orwell's dystopian future, it's force, it's violence, it's thought policing, it's good think. It's essentially, if you think wrong, we're going to have to send you away to correct you, to re-educate you. In fact,
could it not just be both? Could we just do both?
Well, that's what my conclusion is that that's how bad things have gotten. It's actually both.
Depending on whether you cooperate or not?
Exactly. Like, again, well, we're just going to take all these FEMA camps and convert them into, oh, you don't want to get vaccinated? Fine. We'll just keep you here until you've been re-educated and understand how important it is that you get vaccinated, which is literally happening right now in Britain and possibly New York State.
You're just making stuff up.
I know. Just coming off. I should write this down. I could sell this to Hollywood. So we have our soma, we have our drugs that make us think correctly. And we have the mindless entertainment that allows us to think correctly and behave according to what we're told to think and act like by the TV. But in Orwell's reality, it's like, no, it's an authoritarian dictatorship. And you're going to do this or we're going to destroy you. In fact, my favorite take on this is Brazil.
Okay.
Because it's Terry Gilliam.
Oh, you mean the movie? I thought the country.
Yeah, the president of Brazil is an interesting character.
Well, I love the movie. It drives Anne can't watch it with me. I've tried I think 3 times. She doesn't make it very far each time.
Well, I would say this: Terry Gilliam is an acquired taste.
In everything he does. Although she did like the crazy one with the robot mother lady that was on HBO, the show from this last year that he did. I've talked about it here on the show before. Okay. What was that called? Oh, with I just lost it again. I had it.
But now I'm interested. You have to remember.
I will. I'll think of it here. With wolves, not Dancing with Wolves. Raised by Wolves.
He did that?
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I completely dismissed it when I saw the ad for it on YouTube because I was like, oh, another virtue signaling social justice show.
No, I mean, he directed the first 2 episodes. He's like executive producer.
Speaking of bias.
Sorry, folks. No, I'm biased towards him only because I think, I like the Monty Python stuff too.
When I see something nowadays, I automatically assume it's cross, intersectional politics or.
Yeah, he's executive producer.
Okay, cool.
So
I'll check it out.
But anyway, back to Brazil. I like Brazil because the movie is as worthless as the life that the characters are living.
Correct. Yeah.
In the end, you're like, why did I waste my time watching this? And that's the whole point.
Right. No, it's brilliant. It's like, Robert De Niro, his whole character. You're like, why does this person exist in this movie? And you're like, he has no purpose. He's like the dude in The Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to wrap a movie around this character, and the character's like, nah. Nah, I don't think so.
Right.
So Walter Lippmann wrote, in a situation like ours, the damage to our prestige would be irreparable if we all rallied around the president and pretend to think that there was nothing seriously wrong. For that would prove to the world that the blunders will not be corrected, but will be continued, and that our whole people are satisfied with bad government. It is the dissenters and the critics and the opposition who can restore the world's respect for American competence.
Wow. There's a great book. It just came out. It's getting great press. I think it's dropped off the top 10, but it's about it's about being a dissident. What's it called?
Oh yeah, you sent that to me.
I sent the link to you. I bought it. I started reading it. I get distracted easily, so I never get very far in any book. But yeah, I like
being a Christian dissident.
I think so. I don't know if it said Christian dissident.
I think it does actually.
But yeah, we just have to stand in opposition. We can't always do anything about it, You know, like
Mhm.
we're not always given, opportunity yeah, I
A
don't see
manual
it.
for Christian dissidents.
Yeah, that would be nice, but that's not it. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
that's
it's Rod
not it.
Dreher. Yeah, Not by
Mm,
Lies, a manual for Christian dissidents. So this must
mm,
be a book review of it.
mhm,
Live Not by Lies. There you go.
mhm. Live not by lies. There we go.
A
It's in
manual
my
for
queue.
Christian dissidents. It's right there in the title. Okay.
Like I said, I still have a book from like a year ago that I haven't read from
Oh,
this
my stack.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is truth something to use when convenient? It's a pity that Jeremiah could not have adopted that philosophy. It would have saved him bitter criticism and deep suffering. But the religious man who believes in God knows that truth is either an absolute, which has to be respected at all times, or there is no use in telling the truth at any time. We must tell the truth about our enemies always, or nobody will believe us if only on occasion we state facts. It's kind of my thesis yesterday at the voters' meeting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I had somebody after church who I did not expect this to happen say, thank you for actually saying the thing that,
Mhm.
speaking,
Yeah.
directly to
Yeah.
what's happening rather than just saying abstractly, oh, there's evil in the world, right?
Right.
Actually saying, here it is.
Right.
Here's an example.
Mhm.
Here's a whole list of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
in real time.
We must tell the truth about our enemies always, or nobody will believe us if only on occasion we state the facts.
Hmm.
You read the prophets, and then your pastor speaks in the voice of the prophet, and
Right.
you immediately forget what you just read or what happened to the prophet. And then without a speck of irony, you cry for your pastor's head the same way that they cried for Jeremiah's head.
Isn't it interesting that who cried for the head? You look at the prophets, you look at the
Mhm.
apostles, you look at Jesus himself. They're not apolitical.
Right.
I mean, they do kind of live in a parallel life,
Mhm.
because they're not politicians themselves,
Mhm.
but they interact theologically with politicians.
Yep.
Think about like Nathan going to David. Now, granted,
Mhm.
David is supposedly a believer and whatnot,
Mhm.
but you know what Nathan's thinking.
Mhm.
Like, I got to do this right, or I'm losing
Yeah.
my head.
I'm gonna die. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think actually the entire parable was fine. It was just that last sentence. If you just take away "you are the man," we're all good. We're all good, dude.
Right, but it was the right tactic for David, thank God.
Yeah.
For Nathan.
Yeah.
What do we call that? The side door, the back door attack?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
We're going to come around the side on this one, because if I come, frontal assault, you're going to,
Right.
that's not how it's the end of me.
And here's another sticking point. A Christian stands for truth even when it hurts the most,
Mhm.
for only then does he have any authority or any lasting influence. People do not like, at least anecdotally speaking, people do not like when you say that.
Nope.
Meaning, well, I'm a Christian. Yeah, you are. But you just said that you said this about Christians, and I disagree. I know. That's why I said it.
There's a,
Oh, so you're
I mean-
saying I'm not a Christian then? No, you are.
well, here's the problem. Being a Christian does endow you
Yep.
with authority.
Mm-hmm.
You've been authorized to
You've
speak
literally been given the kingdom.
right. And you've been authorized as an ambassador of Christ to speak speak the truth,
Right.
to speak of him
Right.
in the face of evil, to call
Right.
the thing what it is.
Right.
Spade a spade
Well,
or
this
whatever.
is the truth. I didn't hear you mention Jesus once. How can it be the truth if it's not about Jesus? God can't lie.
Well, beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the standards for truth in
Mhm.
like the court of law and a human court of law,
That's different. That's multi.
it is different. It is different. That's my point.
Right. What we talked about is though, where little L law and big L law overlap, we're like, oh man, let's go. How can I support the government?
Right.
Where they diverge, like in abortion, we're like, nope, sorry.
No, because that runs contrary not only to God's word, but also even just to, intuition, human law, natural law.
Yeah.
We would think.
Mm,
And, as much as I
Yeah.
dislike 700 Club, Pat Robertson, that crowd,
Mhm.
he wasn't exactly wrong when he said abortion is going to be the end of our society.
Sure.
You know,
Well, just practically
it's-
speaking. I mean,
yeah, that's true. And then ultimately, I mean, it is a, what do you want to say, a canary in a coal mine.
Mhm.
How many coal mines are there, though?
yeah, right.
It depends on which coal mine you're in,
Right.
who the canary is,
Correct.
and what you're smelling. I mean, there's a lot to smell.
Yeah, there is. For
Both sides
sure.
of the ideological aisle, or
Right.
wherever you want, wherever you want to go within the church.
Right.
And so you got to pick your battles too.
Right.
Not saying which truth do you speak, but rather
Yeah.
when do you speak the truth and where.
So the church is not always guiltless. So that's not just like you said, not just the politicians that are the problem here. The
Nope.
church is not always guiltless. A church conference can try to justify its reluctance to right a wrong by placing its action under the cloak of God's will, as we've seen with COVID. I heard a delegate say that he had a vision from God which made it clear that segregation, at least for the present, was all right. You mean like social distancing?
Which is made up, by the way.
Which is totally made up. There's no scientific data whatsoever.
Go back and listen to the Radiolab episode. I think it was in March, talking about where did the 6 feet come from. And at the end, the conclusion was, this was in March. I don't think they would air this today. No, it's made up. Oh, by the way, it doesn't apply to outside, but watch the inauguration on Wednesday.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute, you're wearing masks, you're outside, and you still need to be 6 feet apart? I'm confused.
Right. That's because viruses are magical. We're literally in the Middle Ages.
It's the magic virus.
It's the magic virus.
Well, it was, according to the now, who was it? Oh, it was the Secretary of State that revealed, yes, that they did a gain of function, that the lab in Wuhan was doing gain of function experiments. That's where they take a virus and they amplify its functionality. And one of those is asymptomatic transmission. That was one of the things they were working on.
Yep.
Huh.
That's
magic.
Right. COVID-21's coming and that'll
replace. It's not really magic. It's really what? Human intervention?
Yeah.
Is that magic?
Well, when you present it without any actual hard facts, it's magic.
Oh, you just destroyed those.
When you conjure things out of thin air because it's convenient, that's magic. Right.
Or you
have a demon.
Or you seed it in Italy because they're reneging on the deal that you made with them for many billions of dollars. Okay.
Right. CDC, asymptomatic people no longer have to be tested. Hey, look at COVID numbers went down. Weird.
All right. What is true?
What is
good
true?
Luck.
Yes. Good luck. And, you always have God's will to fall back on.
It's always true.
God's will. It's God's will. So nothing did more to sicken honest Christians than such errant nonsense and hypocrisy as justifying segregation as God's will. A man died in Los Angeles a little while ago of heart disease.
Oh, yeah. You sent me that this morning.
Yeah, he died from the COVID vaccine. And they're like, no, it was heart disease. Versus last year, they're like, he died from heart disease. No, it was COVID.
Did I send you the Eric Weinstein? Yeah, I did. I sent you some of the thread where he got himself in hot water by saying vaccine. Of course, a vaccine is not 100% safe. People are like, no, you can't say that. You can't say that because people won't get vaccinated. And like, actually, if you're a thinking person, you have to say that.
Yeah. Stop it.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have the vaccine, but you might want to do your research.
Totally not do it. People are dying from it. They're using you as guinea pigs. A man died in Los Angeles a little while ago, who, according to his lights, was a pretty decent fellow. He was a bartender and helped many a friend with a small loan and even fed men who were hungry. As a result, they started calling him Honest Joe. But Joe Sims objected. He said this put too much strain on him, and he did not want to be under the necessity of living up to the name. Good for you, Joe. He said he was only fairly honest, and they gave him the name Fairly Honest Joe.
I like it.
When a man is only fairly honest, he is not honest at all. Who knows when the honest runs out? Shall we be called Fairly Honest America? Are we satisfied to be fairly honest Christians?
This is our kind of humor. I love it.
Right, I know, it's really dark. We must destroy this communist doctrine that propaganda is above the truth, and that to be fairly honest will be enough. As George Washington said at the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention, we must raise a standard to which wise and honest man can repair. The event is in the hands of God.
Wow.
Therefore, finally, there has crept into our thinking the evil doctrine that the church should mind its own business.
Ooh, that'll be good for next episode, yeah?
Ta-da! Yeah.
That's kind of what we've been dealing with for, 10 months?
I was going to say, this is going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation. People that come to church are like, thank you for not minding, saying, hey, you mind your own business, keep your head down, and people are going to do what they're going to do.
Well, you can do that to a point.
Sure, absolutely.
And like I said earlier in the show, I mean, the goal of good government is that it gets out of the way so that you can just go about your life.
Yeah.
But I think we're past that point.
I was going to say, I don't really know any of those.
Right. And I'm not talking about one party at all.
No, of course not.
I mean, think about,
well, we only have one party in this country.
We're at what, $28 trillion of debt now?
Yeah. We have one party with two names.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're ideologically
Right.
Collaborative. I don't know how you want to say that.
I
They
wouldn't
present
be,
themselves as
Right.
opposed, but in the end, they have the same agenda.
knowing who owns CNN and who owns Fox, I wouldn't be surprised if they all were in on the same conference calls in the morning. The way that they exactly mirror each other in the reporting of the news.
Well, that was revealed at the Senate, I think it was, committee where they had Jack Dorsey and Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
That they actually have a common electronic tool where they can post. They post links that they deem one firm deems inappropriate, so that the other firm, can immediately review it and also censor it. And yeah, I mean, and once it's such a strange world because you're like, okay, we want free speech. Some speech is prohibited, right? I mean, you can't make like a threat against someone's life. Can you?
It depends on what state you're in. In Oregon and Washington, it's still legal to engage in a street fight.
Well, okay.
Both people consent.
But what is a threat against someone's life, right? And that's where it gets difficult. You say like, I'm going to kill you.
Well, you could take that as an imminent threat.
You could, or you could say, I'm going to kill your ideas. I'm going to destroy.
We're violence now.
I'm going to destroy you. We're going to. Well, think of this was the well, it continues to be the what do you want to say? The accusation from Trump's speech at his ill-advised rally on January 6th.
Yeah, that happened 20 minutes after they were in the Capitol.
Yeah, I know the timeline doesn't work out, but anyway, I mean, he said, "Let's march." Well, you could say marching. This is what soldiers do, or you could say this is what protesters do. Yeah, or MLK did. This is what dissenters do.
Yeah,
right. Or we're going to. I don't remember all the words. We're going to cheer. Well, you can do that for your team, or you can do that, in hatred towards your enemy.
That's a common sports phrase. We're going to destroy the other team. We're going to destroy.
Yeah, exactly. Is that hate speech?
Yeah.
Well, not in that context. Okay. Right. Well, in the context of a political rally, there's political speech, and it's commonly understood.
Oh, that word context, though, it just ruins everything.
Right, but we talked about this at the very beginning. We're talking about literacy, and it's one of the it's a key component of literacy. What do words mean? And the meaning does change based off of context.
It does, and some words mean nothing. By the way,
some words mean nothing.
A lot of four-letter words, they don't really mean anything.
Well, you used one of them on the episode. I won't mute it.
Sure, absolutely.
I just left it, but
we'll again, grow up. If you're offended by four-letter words, grow up.
I almost let one slip. I got so upset yesterday in Bible class. I'm like, I don't know what the consequence would have been, but it would have been completely appropriate. And yet I'm glad I caught myself because I don't want to deal with that. I know you're in a different context than me.
No, I was in so much pain at the voters meeting for my report, and I just finished communion. At the hospital meditating, I'm like, I think I dropped the word BS at least 6 times in my annual report, and I wasn't even conscious. I was just like,
not the abbreviation.
No. You know me better than that.
There's one of Paul's comments. I threw it up there.
Which one?
He was interacting with us.
Yeah, Thor. That's what I said. He's quoting Thor.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that. And then he had this one too. And I linked him up. Yep. You've watched the Yuri lectures, haven't you?
Yeah.
Those.
Definitely don't watch those.
Did he defect or was he taken captive?
Paul, I thought he defected.
No, Yuri Bezmenov.
Yeah, I thought he defected.
I think he defected.
Paul posted it, so I'm saying Paul. Did he?
Yeah,
defect?
I think he was a defector, and he broke down all of the Russian disinformation and whatnot. And then, in other words, taught us how to do it.
Yeah.
So that we could use the same tactics against them. That's why I realized this yesterday that the propaganda that we've seen from the left has also been utilized by the right. The same techniques,
of course.
The same like false flag events, the same drumming up these conspiratorial groups. So we have Antifa, and we have what's the other one? Black Lives Matter, I guess, to some degree. Sure. Then you've got the Boogaloo thing on the right, and you've got which is like an anarchist. Well, they're not really on the right. They're like an anarchist group that doesn't really care who they are. Yeah. Right. And so who's encouraging the Boogaloo boys? I don't know.
I actually know some guys who belong to that, and
really,
they don't need a lot of encouragement.
No, they're just anarchists.
They're very motivated people
to just destroy and break up things.
They're self-motivated. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, about a lot of it's just like, I'll do this if I want to.
Obviously, there's white supremacists, of course. Yeah.
But there's such a small group in America now. Like the actual numbers that the FBI put out, you're like, well, A, you just said there's hardly any of them left. And B, you said they've infiltrated every level of your agency.
Did you see? I posted
So
that. I posted that on Facebook. We have a white supremacist president who raised up white supremacist followers to fight against white supremacist politicians and against white supremacist police.
Yeah,
it's like, wait a minute, everybody's white. How can they all be fighting against each other? It doesn't make any sense.
It does. Well, it doesn't need to.
No, that's the brilliance of these language games. What I would suggest,
literally, like we are like cats chasing the pointer on the wall. The red
exactly. This is what keeps the regime in power in China.
Correct.
It's ultimately what
can keep the regime in power in America.
Yeah, it's not truth.
Right.
It's actually just confusion.
Well, and to bring it back into our wheelhouse too, more specifically, it's what keeps cults going.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the classic example is Jonestown. Like when Jonestown finally broke down and he just had everybody drink the Kool-Aid, we now know that they held a lot of people at gunpoint to force them to drink the Kool-Aid, because even the people in the jungle are like, I think this dude's nuts.
They figured it out.
They found
the man behind the curtain.
Right.
And that was the end of the story.
And so up to that point, though, the whole motivation from San Francisco to the jungles, where it was, I need to keep these people constantly in a state of upset. And I need to constantly be, distracting them with a laser pointer. So they're focused on what I need them to focus on and not focused on the fact that I'm slowly but surely elevating myself to the position of God. And then, you get out in the jungle and there's no more distractions. It's like I said to you last week, the problem with these politicians who want all this attention is that the more attention they get, the more you see that they're just empty shells.
Yeah.
They're empty vessels. Someone's giving them words to speak because they're dumb. Like they're not capable of critical thinking.
I've wondered, there seems to be a lot of actors. And they're not even great actors. Like the one guy, John Sullivan, who they released. It was clearly a conspirator of some sort, or an informant, or who even knows what's going on with that guy.
All of the above. Yeah.
Because he had charges already, federal charges from Utah that were still outstanding, and he had been released. And then he does the same thing in Washington.
Right.
And he gets released without bail.
Weird, man.
And the guy's not even that.
The chick who bombed the Senate and then Nadler had her pardoned.
Yeah, they bombed in 84, and then she was pardoned under Clinton. 96 maybe.
Yep. And then came back around to form BLM.
And she's on the board for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Look it up, kids.
But that's the point. Like we noted, which is it? Do you want some of the truth, all the truth? Can you handle the truth? Or do you prefer to stay in the dark and stay asleep?
I think we should maybe not read Dreyer's book that we mentioned, Live Not by Lies, A Manual for Christian Dissonance. Here's what we should read. The essay that he based it on from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Live Not by Lies.
Good.
So I got it linked here. I'll put it. So remember, it's in the show notes for this episode. We'll come back to it.
Right. So
1974 essay.
Let's wrap it up with Jesus.
Good.
Is that the truth, capital T truth, Jesus, reveals all of this. Period. That's what the gospel of Jesus Christ reveals, is that everything that we're talking about, they're not gods. They're not divine. They don't serve God.
Nope.
Because no Jesus.
But can we add a caveat that God uses them for our benefit?
Yeah, to repent us of bestowing upon them divine power.
That's right.
They're false gods.
Fear, love, and trusting in them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at the root of this whole sermon about communism is the state is your religion, your God, and your mommy and daddy, and your banker, and the arbiter of truth.
Your employer.
Exactly.
They control every sphere of your life.
Yes.
That's the goal anyway.
And so to bring it back to a more granular point, if this is how your church functions, you've got a problem. A big problem, actually.
What do you mean?
Your pastor may not be a communist and your church council might not be socialists. But if that's how your church functions, your clergy or your staff or anybody, where it's not about Christ and revealing the truth of this, but rather that person or those people are functioning as, I speak for God. I am this church. We are all one big family and I'm the patriarch of that family, or that, they're the matriarchs of the family. Or like you said, Like we're the arbiters of truth for you. We'll tell you what Christian history is or isn't, what's true and what's not true, which is kind of the focus of this show. Is like, it's you and I basically being a pigeon on a chessboard. I mean, like, is this guy really a heretic? Is this really theologically sound? Is this something we need to focus on? Is this of Christ? So in a way, you, the listener in particular, you also have to determine for yourself whether this whole program is propaganda or flips into propaganda.
Wow.
Because
yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to do the live show, honestly.
Right.
Is that we do get some feedback, but it's usually like a month after we broadcast. We've already moved on from the topic or whatnot. And, and we appreciate the criticism, but
I don't think we can move on from the fact that the Republic is dead and we're now living in an authoritarian dictatorship. I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Well, no, you can't move on from that. But what I mean is that, like, if you can interact with us more in real time, we can actually respond in real time. Right. And like, if we say something not clear or not as precise, the opportunity to respond that way, and frankly, that's why I like this platform that we're using, because I could actually invite you and you could just come on with your camera.
Yeah, do it.
And just talk at us.
Do it.
And we'll talk at you.
Do it. Just do it.
Because that's what you do on the computers. You talk at each other.
On the internet. So I have to go get a stent yanked out of my body.
You do. I don't want to keep you too much longer.
My nurse is telling me it's time to wrap this up. So as always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you especially to Paul today for playing the game with us. Go check out the full YouTube stream if you want the first 20 minutes of this podcast. Otherwise, next week we might wrap up this sermon and move on to Solzhenitsyn, or we'll see how it goes. But nonetheless, watch out for propaganda in church, outside the church. And remember that the truth ultimately is Jesus and only Jesus and him alone. Good?
Good.
All right. Peace. Okay. Sehr gut.
All right. Have fun with your stent.
Thanks.
I'm going to end the broadcast.
Sounds good. Peace.